Call the meeting to order. Welcome, everyone. Thank you. All right, we are going to begin with roll call of our board members. Sue, please.
Alicia Gardner.
Present.
Melissa Parks. Present. Chuck Melky.
Present.
Carrie Germain.
Present.
Jessica Lede.
Present.
Jack Sayer.
Present.
Brian Buchanan.
Present.
All right. Are they on? I don't think so. I think it's on.
I can hear you guys.
Hello.
Our lights are on, but I'm not sure if the next one.
Check, 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 check.
Check, 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 check.
What we're gonna do is turn it off and turn it on. No, this one's working.
Did you unplug it for 10 seconds?
Yeah.
Plug it back in.
Reset.
Check, check, check. Nothing?
Check.
Check, check, check.
That sounded like it was
It might need to be turned up a little.
Check, check, check.
Check.
Check, check, check.
That one's better.
They're on now.
Check, check, check.
Can everybody hear us now?
Yes.
Good, thank you.
Not sure they want to, but.
Thank you, Travis.
Yeah.
All right, I would invite all of you to join me in the Pledge of Allegiance.
I
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, board members, before us we have a consent agenda that includes our meeting minutes from our previous meeting and the approval of this agenda. I would entertain a motion for approval.
So moved.
Support.
Jack and Alicia, any comments or questions? Hearing none, those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right. So this is an exciting evening for all of us, and I know we have a full house tonight. I want to welcome you as tonight we will be interviewing Mr. Rod Heatherton, our interim superintendent, for position of the superintendent of Swartz Creek Schools. One of the most important responsibilities that we have as a school board is to select, work closely with, and evaluate the superintendent. And the superintendent, as most of you probably know, acts as the chief executive officer or CEO of the district, and they're responsible for implementing the board policies that we establish and managing the district overall so that we can accomplish the goals that we've set for the district, but mostly for our students. As a board, this is a responsibility that we all take very seriously. Mr. Sapanik and I have had several opportunities to be involved in this process, and it's something that we take seriously on behalf of our community as well. Following the last board meeting, Mr. Micah posted a community survey for feedback on the selection for our superintendent. And before we begin, I want to thank the community for their input that we received through the survey. We received 50 responses that included attributes, characteristics, and traits that community members look for in a superintendent. I've summarized the list, and for my fellow board members, it's on the back page of your questions, but I want to share it with the community so that you can keep it in mind as Mr. Heatherton is responding to our questions. They are looking for someone who is honest, transparent, and open, has a high degree of integrity, is hardworking, personable, friendly, supportive, and energetic, kind, thoughtful, and compassionate, a good listener and communicator who solicits input and feedback from stakeholders, has the best interest of students and staff in mind, considers safety and security a priority for students and staff, is a student-centered leader, is invested in the community and dedicated to the district, is focused on families, students, and the community, values diversity and equity as a strength within a community, visible in the buildings and the community, is team-oriented, good relationships with staff, is a good public speaker, is decisive in their leadership skills, is positive, reflective, and collaborative, is a forward thinker, and a creative instructional leader who values best practices and innovation. Also someone who is an experienced teacher and administrator, and someone who's a visionary, who is flexible, willing to take risks, and support change as needed. This interview will consist of 22 questions, and there may be some follow-up questions that include key areas of responsibility for a superintendent that are critical for long-term success of students and the district. Questions were submitted by board members and represent topics identified in the community survey. As was discussed at the last board meeting, and I want to thank Mr. Sapanik publicly for presiding at that meeting, I collected and collated the questions and have assigned 3 questions to each board member. Board members received their questions at the start of our meeting tonight, and I mention that because I want everyone to know and assure them that questions have not been shared with Mr. Heatherton in advance, with the exception of the 2 questions that were discussed at the July 13th board meeting in the open meeting. At the end of the board's questions, I will give Mr. Heatherton an opportunity to ask questions of the board and to provide a closing statement. I will then dismiss Rod as we begin our discussion and deliberation phase of the evening in open session. You're all welcome to stay. He will be asked to return once we've completed our discussion. Are there any discussions from my fellow board members before we begin?
Just a note, Carrie, that we discussed before the board meeting in casual conversation that we may have a few questions after the completed 21 to 22 questions total, and that you would make a judgment call if they were appropriate or inappropriate, and that we could ask a couple if needed at the end of the meeting. I just want to clarify that.
Sure, thanks, Chuck. These were questions that were brought to us this evening, and I shared that they might be answered either in the opening responses that Mr. Heatherton has, or throughout the answers that he's providing, or the other questions that board members are asking.
Carrie, one more clarification. I just want to check this. We're not voting tonight, is that correct? We're talking tonight. We may potentially vote if we feel that way, but I don't see on here that there's a potential vote. I wanted to clarify.
That is an option, and that we can discuss that later. After this process, when Mr. Heatherton is dismissed, then we can talk about the options that we have, and then go through that process and discussion and deliberation.
Thank you.
Okay? Is that okay with everybody? Does that work? All right.
That's good.
So, Mr. Heatherton, where is he? You're kind of critical to this. If you would like to join us at the table. And Travis, are we good so we can switch back and forth? Okay. So for the community and those that in the audience, we're hoping that we'll be able to see Mr. Heatherton when he's responding to the questions. And so, thank you, sir, very much. I did. So, Mr. Heatherton, I've been reminded that it is your birthday today. So on behalf of the school board, happy birthday.
Thank you very much.
What better way to celebrate your birthday?
I just
All right.
can't think of a better way to celebrate.
I'm sure you can. So thanks, Rod, for being here tonight and for your service to the district and the community, and especially our students. So let's begin with the first questions. Tell me when you're ready, sir.
I think I'm ready to go.
Okay. So as was discussed at our previous meeting, I'm going to start with the 2 questions that were proposed there. Beginning with, tell us about yourself and why you want to serve as superintendent of Swartz Creek Community Schools.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. One of our values in Swartz Creek is family, so I think as I start out to tell you a little bit about myself, I'm going to introduce my family who is here with us tonight. So We have right behind me my mother and father, Dwayne and Diane. They are lifelong Swartz Creek residents, have lived on Morris Road in the house that I grew up for over 50 years, and they are here with us tonight. My mom was recently telling me a pretty funny story. We were looking through some historical books about the history of our family in Swartz Creek. And she come across this paragraph, and my great-grandpa, Ralph Kleinedler, was sitting on the docks over at the old, what do you call it, the granary over there on Morris in the railroad there. And he was sitting there, he's just a warm summer afternoon watching folks get off the train. Now, he's an immigrant from Czechoslovakia. And lo and behold, this young lady gets off the train and catches his eye. And she happens to be an immigrant from Czechoslovakia, only like 40 miles from where he grew up. They don't know each other. He decides to engage in a conversation with her, and that becomes my great-grandma and grandpa Kleinedler, who have been in Swartz Creek since the early 1900s. So that was a little story about my family and Creek, and it just kind of made me smile when we talk about family as one of our values. My brother is here with us, Robert Heatherton, also a Swartz Creek grad. He is the current Director of Special Education at Carmen Ainsworth Schools. He lives in Swartz Creek. He has 2 kids, and they go to Morris Elementary and Elms Road Elementary. I also have 2 of my sons with us. 19 graduate, Andrew. He is going to be a senior at CMU, and he's going into physical therapy. 2020 graduate, Jacob, is a junior, and he's going into nursing at U of M. And with Jacob is his girlfriend, who happens to be a 2020 graduate as well, and a Morris student, she reminded me today. And last but not least, my wife, Ashley, and Ashley, as you know, is a TC at the high school and works with special ed students. 2 more that could not be with us, Harry and Henry, because, you know, Harry cannot sit longer than a minute. And so they're with me, Ma, watching the live stream. I did tell them I'd give a shout out to Harry and Henry. Just like Bob's kids, they are at Morris and Elms Road Elementary. Also, who couldn't be here, my daughter Adriana, she is at a Swartz Creek volleyball camp tonight. So we kick off a 3-day Swartz Creek volleyball camp, and she'll be a senior at Swartz Creek High School. So that is my family. I went to Swartz Creek High School. I'm a 1991 graduate. I've touched almost all buildings in the district as a student or an employee. I went to Mary Crapo as a preschool student. I went to Elms Road Elementary, K through 5, then went to Mary Crapo again. At that point, it was a 6th grade building. I then went to the middle school, which back in that time frame was a 7, 8, 9, and then transitioned over to the high school as a 10, 11, 12. So very proud of my rich heritage in Creek and my family's heritage. Probably the 2 things that stand out to me the most at Swartz Creek High School was just my teammates, played football, was co-captain, and the other experience that really stands out to me at Swartz Creek High School was National Honor Society. Just a great opportunity to do things for others. I then went on to U of M Flint. I have 3 degrees. My first degree is a bachelor's in elementary education. I also have a certificate in social sciences. I have an MPA from U of M in the Rackham Graduate School, and I have my Ed Specialist in Educational Leadership from Oakland University, and I'm a certified teacher as well as a certified central office administrator. I've had a 26-year career. I've had some pretty exciting opportunities and twists and turns in that career. I started out as a 5th and 6th grade teacher at St. Robert's School in Flushing, Michigan. Great experience, taught science and ELA, ironically, not my majors and minors, but that's how it went, right? And I coached football and baseball. It was a great time, it was a great group. At the end of my 4th year, the principal came to me and offered me, at the age of, I was just wrapping up 26, the opportunity to be the assistant principal. I was pretty excited about it, but it wasn't really a standalone position. It was on top of all the coaching and teaching, you were going to deal with some other things. I had the opportunity to go to a public school, and though I was excited, I did decline that opportunity and went to Fenton Public Schools. At Fenton Public Schools, I was in the Fenton Intermediate School, and I taught 5th grade there, and there I was teaching mainly math and social studies. Did a little bit of coaching. I stepped back from most of the coaching that I had been doing previously just because I was wrapping up my MPA, and we had a clinical practice to take care of, and it was a lot of work. Towards the end of the MPA, I started putting out feelers, got a few opportunities before I was completed, but when I finally completed my 3rd year at Fenton, I had wrapped up my MPA, and I interviewed in Lansing, at Lansing Waverly Schools, and I became the assistant principal of Waverly East, which was also a 5-6 building. Great experience, great mentorship. Valerie Hendrickson Carr was the principal, and her mentorship on relationships was superb. Being an administrator is a hard job. Being in education is a hard job, and if she hadn't been there to work with me and talk about the importance of building relationships, I don't know if I would have stuck with it. So it was an awesome experience. Again, got the opportunity to move back to the area, was a finalist at the same time for McGrath Elementary and Grand Blanc as I was for Moorish Elementary in Swartz Creek. Funny, I found out years later that they were like swapping stories about me and whether I was number 1 or number 2 in each site. At the same time, I did choose Moorish Elementary. So happy that I came back to my hometown to be the principal. I spent 10 years as the principal at Moorish Elementary. We did some exciting things. A lot of the groundbreaking stuff that we talk about still today happened in that building. The very first 90-30-30 intervention session happened. In fact, we presented about that at one of the board meetings, and it was Dr. Mitchell, if you recall, who said, "Oh, that's fascinating data. Can we hear about that every year?" And so now you know why you get a report on MTSS data. Thank you, Dr. Mitchell. We also did some pretty cool things with the behavior expectations. I think Mrs. Trent is here somewhere, but it was in her kindergarten classroom where district reps gathered, and that's where we actually created the CREEK rubric. So, you know, when you hear commit to learning, respect others, everyone is responsible, you know, everyone is safe, and kindness counts, that happened in that classroom. We went on to do some really cool things. That's when the state was doing different kinds of measurement under No Child Left Behind. And for 4 years, they created a top to bottom. And so they ranked every school in the state of Michigan. And for 4 straight years, Moorish Elementary finished in the top 5 to 10% in the state of Michigan on the top to bottom. And in the 4th and final year, they actually bestowed upon us a reward school. So we had worked really hard with our data. It was our focus area. It was not something we applied for. They basically bestowed the award on us because us compared to all other like schools, which we were a K-5 of about 500 kids with that diversity and socioeconomic setup in a suburb across the state, we had more growth than every other common school of our size and our demographics, and that's how we got the reward school. That was an awesome opportunity. I did a 6 to 9 month stint up at the high school because Dr. Jeff Hall asked me to run the high school. We had a situation where the principal was not able to do that. Stepped in, did that, enjoyed getting to meet a whole different, set of staff. I had at that point known mostly the elementary folks in Swartz Creek, and then I got to meet all the secondary folks. So that was an amazing opportunity. And then October of that year, 2014, Dr. Adam Hartley had an opportunity to go do some other work. And when he left us, Dr. Hall appointed me as the assistant superintendent in charge of curriculum and instruction. I've been at central office now for 8 years. Mr. Micah came in, and we've done a lot of collaborative things with 5D, with coaching, just with so many different things that I probably should just stop talking about because we'll get to later. But about 2 or 3 years ago, been elevated my position from assistant superintendent to deputy superintendent. And this is where I sit today. Why do I want to be the superintendent of Swartz Creek? Because everything I just said, for 26 years, all I've been doing is preparing for this moment. I've been working, I have been elevated, I care so much about this community, I care so much about these kids, You who know me know that I have had conversations and focus on kids the entire 18 years that I've been here. And so now here's an opportunity to lead at the biggest level you can lead at. And I would kick myself if I didn't take the opportunity to do something that I've dreamed about for 18 years in Swartz Creek. So I'm a local kid, and I am living out my dream right now.
Thanks, Rod, very much. Give you a second to take a drink. Our second question is to describe your vision for Swartz Creek Community Schools, and if you want to throw in something about the mission, that would be fine as well.
My vision for Swartz Creek Community Schools can be wrapped up in one small phrase, and that's good to great. I think we have the opportunity to be the best in the county. I think Swartz Creek is in a position to not just be a leader in the county, but to be a destination district where students want to come to Swartz Creek, where support staff wants to come work in Swartz Creek, where teachers want to come and work in Swartz Creek, and you're already seeing that happening in pockets. But I think that with the new facilities and with my opportunity to lead, that we can even take that to another level. I also don't think that we should settle for being the #1 school district in the county. I think we should be one of the best school districts in the state. And the state is aware of us. It's not like we haven't been recognized before. Morris was recognized as a reward school. Gaines was recognized as a blue ribbon. The high school has been recognized for the AP. And of course, Swartz Creek is kind of on the map in Michigan for its work in MTSS. So Jim Collins in Good to Great and John Gordon in Positive Leadership both talk about getting the right people on the bus. But not just getting the right people on the bus, getting the right people in the right spot on the bus. And I think that's why in our strategic plan we have a whole focus area on talent management. And that's why we're able to make a great hire recently this summer with Michelle Dexter, who is leading human resources, who has a legal background, who is already doing some phenomenal things. So I think that's very important. They also talk about, besides being with the right people, on the right bus, in the right seat, that if you want to go from good to great, then you should be focusing on the things you're good at, not your weaknesses. And so if we're going to take that approach, and that's what I recommend, is focusing on our strengths, then we would focus on our MTSS systems. It's one of the things that we're known for. As you know, we haven't sat on our laurels. We have adapted and moved all the way through these last 4 or 5 years with the pandemic. We've included social emotional learning. We've included trauma-informed care. We've done all of the ACEs research. We've talked a lot about what it means to deal with anxiety and depression and coming out of a pandemic. And so we have added to the rich interventions we provide on the academic side a whole host of behavior and wellness interventions that I think is very important to the whole child. A culture of learning, that was a belief statement from our mission and vision 2 times ago when we revised it, and now in our current mission and vision, it is a value as continuous learning. And what you're really looking at when you talk about a culture of learning or continuous learning, you're talking about reverse engineering. You're talking about looking at the end in mind. You're talking about going to the student level and focus on the learning. And when you focus on the learning, what does this kid learn versus that kid? How does this individual learn versus another individual? And work on strategies and philosophies from there. You really impact the culture and people start talking about the learning. And when you talk about the learning, the focus is on the student, and that's why we exist. STREAM is our third area that we're real good at. We started off as DEEC STEM Academy. Michelle Bealby, Bruce Fuller, Adam Hartley, they did some amazing work there. You asked to expand that, and I don't remember who is still on the board, but if you recall, I came to you with a $400,000 proposal and laid out how that would expand and what that would look like at every other elementary, and I am so grateful that you guys said yes to that proposal, because that was a lot of money. But look now at that insight and your ability to see that vision and approve it and what we've done. So then STEM goes to every school, and then we have Project Lead the Way in the middle school and in the high school, and so now we're K-12, STEAM, and then we pass a bond in 2018, and we put the resources behind the vision in every single school. So now we have state-of-the-art. I dare say, show me another Class A high school and middle school that have the STEM facility that we now have to go with the STEM philosophy that we've been working on for over 10 years. And then finally, I think the fourth strength that we should focus on, MTSS, culture of learning, STREAM, and the fourth strength is the strategic plan. We've started that work. We've talked about 5 focus areas. You guys have nailed down, I think, 2 or 3 goals under each one of those focus areas. I think it is so important to have that driver and that vision. We have a board workshop coming up. I'd like to hammer that out. Let's get the measurables in there. Let's talk about what those action steps look like. Then let's bring it to the full board. Let's adopt it, and then let's publish it. And then let's show the community and our stakeholders, this is what our vision looks like for Swartz Creek Community Schools. I think if you do those 4 things, then Swartz Creek can go from good to great.
Thanks, Rod. In your career, please talk about best practices you've identified, replicated, and applied, and what was their impact on student and/or staff development and performance. And please include one innovation or achievement which you are especially proud of. And it sounds like you might have more than one, but at least one.
Absolutely. I love innovation. I love student performance. I love talking about learning. I think we've done a lot of things. The great thing about the MTSS team is I don't think people understand sometimes that it's not just one thing. MTSS is multi-tiered systems of support. It is an umbrella. And under that umbrella are all the supports. Tier 1, Tier 2, Tier 3, social, emotional, academic. It could be math. It could be reading. It could be writing. It encompasses everything. So obviously I talked about how we kicked that off at Morris some 12, 15 years ago, and we've continued to work on it. When Jody Morgan was the MTSS coordinator, we said, let's get this written down and let's flesh out what that umbrella looks like. And so we put pencil to paper and we created a 30, 40-page document on all those things that fit inside that umbrella. And from there, we've just continued to create and innovate, and we have now an instructional team that meets once a month. And they've been meeting for, well, geez, we've been meeting for probably 3 years at least. And that has key MTSS leaders at every building and at every level. And it's about a team of about 13, half our instructional specialists and half our principals, myself and Kevin as well. And in there, we talk about how do you take everything in this umbrella and then create experiences in PD. So you have this innovation, you're working on this series. Trauma-informed care is not only in our MTSS process, it's our MyKIP goal. We have a 5-year goal with the state of Michigan on how to improve wellness for kids. And from that team discusses all the time, so what does that look like? How do we create that innovation and create experiences for the staff? How do we create that and make that PD? So one of the most powerful things we did was work on these little aspects. So we created this sheet. What are all the things that we want to accomplish as PD in every single building so that we are not only aligned with our MTSS behavioral system, we're aligned with our state school improvement goal, but staff and students are actually feeling the effects. And so there's a continuum, and I've showed it at academic achievement multiple times. It talks about the stages of moving from trauma aware to trauma informed, right? And you have sensitive and responsive and then fully aware. And in those stages, there's certain things that should be accomplished if you're fully, really embracing the wellness of kids. And so one of those things is trauma champions. So everybody write down, you need to identify who your trauma champions is, have some PD about that. Some of those things are peace corners, safe corners, regulation rooms. We move from talking about this child had a behavior to, is this child regulated or not regulated, right? And then what do we do to bring them back to regulation? The purpose of a regulation room is we want that child back to a capacity where they can learn. So the moment they are regulated, they're back in the learning environment. Or if you're doing a peace corner, which many people prefer now, is the child doesn't even leave the room. They're getting regulated by themselves in that corner. And so you go through these lists of all these different things that you can do, and we just laid it out. Throughout the year, as we return from the pandemic, we are going to PD because it's our goal, and we're going to create all these experiences. And so our TCs, Michelle and Ashley and Mandy, have done multiple PDs on ACEs, on trauma-informed care, on how to be a champion and how to be aware, and things like that. Probably the biggest output of 3 years of PD on that, or 4 years really. The pandemic stalled us a little bit. We were supposed to be fully trauma-informed a year ago, but obviously things have changed and things were even more difficult in terms of stressors on kids. But we had the opportunity to get into a grant with the ISD, and they were running free restorative practices, and they were teaching circles to everyone. And I had a chance to talk with Amy Jackson and Kevin, who help us with the MTSS instructional team. We're like, what if we sent leaders across the district to this training, and then in the end of the year, those were our in-house leaders, and the entire staff could be trained at once. So all 200 people spent a day training on restorative practice and actually living in circles. So we called, they had multiple conversations with the trainer and with the ISD, and they're like, that's fantastic. We've never done a full effort, everyone's trained district before, let's do it. And so we just kept encouraging, sign up your social workers, sign up your special ed teachers, sign up your principals, sign up your student success coordinators. There's people in this room who went to there's probably multiple people in this room who went to that training, fantastic training. And then at the end of the year in our PD day, they were the leaders. We had 16 circles. And so the gentleman from MSU led the circles, but you had a facilitator in each circle from Swartz Creek who was fully trained on a 2-day training to be. So that's one really drawn out example of this is a goal, this is how it works under our umbrella, this is how we meet as a leadership team to flesh it out. Here's the activities we put together, and here's the end product that not only have we been PD'd and trained upon the whole year, we've now had accumulating experience at the end where everyone experiences, the same thing. And I dare say I've led some pretty good PDs. I was mostly just on the side in this one that we had the best response on that PD of any end of the year PD that we've had. We usually have pretty good responses, but we had 0 negatives on that particular feedback, so that was pretty exciting. That is just talking about taking one of our district goals and creating opportunities for people to learn. I'm just going to rattle off a couple of things I'm proud of. The culture of learning, when we did that committee, is probably my favorite committee. That was Carrie, Adam Hartley, Michelle Corbett, myself, and Dr. Hall, and we just really fleshed out, and that's where culture of learning came from. It was Michelle Corbett who said, hey, let's do a Twitter chat and call it this, and then that went on for 5 years. We ended up writing a book. I mean, that we talked to people all over the country, so that was powerful. That $400,000 STEAM expansion, very proud of. The summer school expansion that we've done recently, where we changed the focus from just catching up to being inquiry-based and STEAM-based. And not only that, we went from 80 to 100 kids to 400 to 500 kids. We've done that for 2 years in a row. It's been fantastic. Those summer school people are amazing. They're going to come talk to you August 22nd, 3rd, 4th, whatever that board meeting is. So that's all stuff that I'm very proud of. Probably most recently when Ben and I got a chance to go out to the University of Washington and meet with all of the Center for Educational Leadership folks, talk about things like warm demander and best practices, and not just using the evaluation as a check mark, but really using it as a coaching model. That's been my most recent thing, but that's kind of a list of things that I've been pretty excited about.
Thanks, Rod, very much. Now I'm going to turn it over to Alicia, and she can ask the questions.
Give you a second. If you could, please, can you describe ways that Swartz Creek could collaborate with other districts to learn and share for success?
I love collaboration. It was in my second, maybe first year at Moorish. Like, we had to have a staff meeting on the word collaboration. Like, we had to literally talk about, we are going to open our doors of the classroom. We are going to let other people come in. We're going to, swap stories about good things. Literally led a staff meeting on what it means to be collaborative. Now, that's 18 years ago, so a lot's changed. You say collaboration now, we're all used to it, right? But back in the day, that is not, the way we did school, right? And so we've come a long way in education. We've come a long way in Swartz Creek. I think some of my favorite collaborations have been with some of these things we've talked about. I have been to the ISD 3 separate times just to talk to different groups about MTSS. I have worked, with Fenton and Carmen. I went out with a group of people to Graham Blank's Ed Camp. They're like, hey, you want to come out and present to us? I know you guys are doing a lot of stuff. It's when we first started doing trauma. We took a whole crew out to Graham Blank, and they're like, this is amazing. Just, thank you for coming. So I know that, we live in a competitive world. We live in a competitive country, and we, everybody wants the most in pupil accounting. But the way you truly grow and build is you let your people have those experiences. And so that's my favorite thing to do. We've done it with many local districts. When Dr. Hartley first became the superintendent in Fenton, he said, I know what you guys have done with MTSS. Can I bring a group out? Absolutely, you can bring a group out. Let's roll through the whole system. Let's talk about it. Let's learn from each other. We've talked about, doing teacher labs before across school districts. We've sent people to, speaking of teacher labs, we're always kind of focused on that reading, writing. What does writer's workshop look like? What does reader's workshop look like? And sending people out to other districts. As far as Lapeer, when we did standards-based grading, we've sent people all over the state on what that looks like. I can remember going with Dr. Pratt all around the state just to look at what does a beautiful PAC look like? What does it need? What does the soundboard look like? What do the lighting look like? What should you have? Well, how big should the lobby be? Are you going to be holding events in the lobby? Or are you not? Is your building going to be attached to the building? Is it not going to be attached to the building? And I tell you what, people in education are great. I haven't met someone who doesn't want to share their story or share their success. You go to a conference, people are like, hey, I'm working on this. What are you working on? How do you do that? This is how we do it. So collaboration is awesome. How could we do more collaboration? I mean, we're doing great things. I can't wait to get these STEAM rooms up and running. We've started baseline conversations with Kettering University and U of M, and they're talking about some pretty grand things. So let's collaborate with them. Let's get it to a point where our kids can experience so many engineering and science and math activities in our own STEM space that when they leave Swartz Creek, they already have credits going into Kettering. How phenomenal just on the student learning side. How phenomenal if you have to pay a Kettering bill, right? I mean, Kettering has got to be the most expensive local college around. So those conversations are in the baby infancy stages, but I love to collaborate. I've done a lot of collaboration. If you made me pick one future collaboration, that would be it. Let's get with Kettering. Let's get with U of M. Let's get with MSU. Let's get people who know what they're doing and create programs so that we can have our own homegrown kids walk into Kettering with credits. That would be phenomenal.
Thank you. How would you advocate for political action that touches education across the state? And then secondly, what legislative priority do you foresee having the greatest impact on education in the next 1 to 3 years?
That's a great question. You're welcome. My predecessor is a master in the state of Michigan political field. And so before he left, I've already started having conversations with him. I said, I want to be on this committee. He's like, okay, well, the Genesee County retreat is on this day. You get to pick committees. I was like, how do I get on the political committee? I know that you're on that one, and I want to meet with state legislators. I need to make these connections. I need to be able to talk to people in Lansing to have an impact for our community. So that is, I think, the biggest advocacy you can have, is really talking and collaborating with and having those conversations, and not just conversations, having connections, to be able to text a state rep or a state senator. We're dealing with this. How are you guys dealing with it? I want to go down to Lansing. I want to take part in all of that. And so August 11th, I think, I have to check my calendar, I think is the ISD retreat. If I'm selected as the superintendent of Swartz Creek, one of the committees that I will be choosing is the legislative committee. And I'm excited about that. What is the biggest legislative priorities coming down in the next 1 to 3 years? Well, I think anything involving money is the most important thing. When you're getting $450 a kid like we did this year, it sure makes problems go away. When you have the money coming in, when you have the funding coming in, not only do we have $450 coming in this year, but we have safety money coming in and security money, health and wellness money. We have a lot of different categoricals coming in. A lot of things that we're working on, those money fall right into the pockets of where we need it. Social working, nursing, police, safety. So that's pretty exciting. That's all to be bore out this year. I also think that it would be nice, and I know they're working on it, but we've long said it would be great if you could get these student data points out of the evaluation system. It really taints the way evaluation is done. It surely taints coaching. Like, if I'm going to have a conversation with you and I want to coach you and I want you to be authentic about your weakness, but you're worried about some data point from some standardized test score that happened 2 years during a pandemic and half of the kids weren't even in school, how are you going to have that authentic conversation with me? You don't want to have that authentic conversation. I can tell you, I guarantee you, 60 to 70% of the teachers in the district don't want to have that authentic conversation because they're worried about, well, how does the data point play in, and did it come from the MEEP, or did it come from the M-STEP, or is it going to be local? Is it going to be a benchmark? So the last time I think I heard Senator Horn talk, their goal was to get it to 0. If nothing else, their goal was to get it from 40 back to 25, which is how it was originally introduced into the law. I think they had grand purposes when they did that. I think the purpose is, you have authentic data and that can show who you are. Well, that did not bear out. Number one, the data is not authentic at all, and it didn't bear out practices. You want to improve practices, coach your teachers. That's how you improve practices. So I don't know where that lands. I'd love to see it get to 25%. If it could get to 0, that would be fantastic.
Thank you. What role should the school district play in supporting student and staff mental health and well-being? Describe your experiences and your vision for Swartz Creek in this arena.
Absolutely. Mental health was becoming an issue before the pandemic. And I don't know if you want to play the blame game with society, if you want to say it was technology, but there was already an increase in anxiety and depression in our teenagers already. And then the pandemic hit. And that only exacerbated the issue. The depression, the isolation, the anxiety, and those are real issues with everyone, but especially with our students. That's one of the reasons we talk about the trauma-informed care, and we talk about reaching a child. I think when we did the ACEs research at Academic Achievement, or maybe even it was a board night, we talked about, so you have these risk factors that happen to you before you're 18, and they have all these consequences, not just on behavior, but on your health. I mean, you can decrease your lifespan by 10 years. You have a greater chance of alcoholism. You have a greater chance of domestic abuse. You have a phenomenally increased chance of suicide. And the research also says, though, hey, if you could get one caring adult to make a connection with a kid, you can actually wipe out some of those consequences of early childhood trauma. And so that's been the basis of our trauma-informed care journey, is to try to create that connection with every kid. I know that we've been talking about it for a couple of years, but if you recall 3 years ago, we told the staff, For the first month of school, you are not going to do curriculum. And do you remember the reaction? What? You want me to not teach anything for the first month of school? Yes, I do not want you to teach anything for the first month of school. What are we going to do? You're going to make connections. You know, why is that important? Because if I make a connection with a kid, number one, I can wipe away that trauma. I can make an impact. I can take a kid who may have been into substances, may have been in an abusive situation, may have had suicidal tendencies. If I make a real connection, I can reverse that. Do we need to even talk anymore about a more powerful reason why to do that? But furthermore, from a systems reason, why do we not want to teach contact? Because if I have a real relationship, if I built that relationship, if I really know that student, if I know that they're playing volleyball or soccer, if they're weightlifting or whatever, they're involved in theater, band, tennis, swimming, anything, if I can then have these little pieces of information, if I can go to some of those events, if I can show up at the band concert, if I can have that. And then at the end of the year, when the push comes, because either way, we're pushing to get through all the curriculum. There's not enough time to get through the curriculum. I think it's like, you know, there's like, I don't know, 22 years of curriculum to get done in 10 years or something. It's ridiculous. You're not going to get through it. But guess what? If you have a relationship with those kids at the end of the year when they're tired and when they're ornery and when it's warm outside and someone wants to go to the lake and sit at the beach, they're going to work a little bit harder for someone they have a connection with. They're going to they're going to have a little bit more grit, and they're going to finish out. And you're going to see a better result for someone who cares about doing well in your class than if you jumped into content in August, never made a connection, and at the end of the year, all they want to do is get out of your class. And so there's multiple reasons for making connections. And I also think that one of the things that we were doing right before the pandemic hit, we were so close, and that was that community health night. I mean, I think you guys had like half of it already prepared. Our principals had half of it already prepared. We had people who were coming out, and it was scheduled. And then 2020 hit, and I mean, we weren't allowed to go anywhere for 3 months. So I know that we've talked about that, in a lot of situations lately. That is something we have to get back off the ground. And I would like to see us accomplish in the spring or early, February of 2023, what we first planned to accomplish in April of 2020, which is a community health fair and getting people the resources that they need.
Thank you. I will now turn it over to our Vice President, Brian.
Thank you. So Rod, tell me, what have you implemented in your role as Deputy Superintendent, and how has this improved district operations and/or outcomes?
Well, Brian, I've only been Deputy Superintendent for 2 or 3 years. However, what is something that I haven't mentioned tonight that has improved district outcomes while I was Deputy Superintendent? Well, the things that I can think of in the last 2 to 3 years, I mean, most of that time we're dealing with a pandemic, mind you, so there was a lot of innovative things that happened during that time. We gave people choice. We allowed them to choose online. We allowed them to choose hybrid. We allowed them to choose face-to-face, and I think over 65% of the people chose face-to-face. It was not a popular decision with staff because that's hard work. It's hard work on the principal scheduling. It's hard work on a teacher. It's hard work on everyone. I think the community really appreciated the innovation because, hey, I have a choice. If I want to stay home, I have the ability to do class. If I want to come a little bit, I have the ability to do hybrid. And, if I want to be here all day, every day like normal, then I have the ability to do that because Swartz Creek gave me a choice. So not a lot of people did that. So I think that's probably our strongest innovation through the last 3 years and through the pandemic. I would say the other two things that I can think of most recently is, that I'm on the bond steering committee, and a lot of great conversations going on that committee about choices and completion, and I can't say enough about obviously you look outside and you see that pile of dirt. It doesn't look great, but look over that pile of dirt and look at that beautiful stadium. Like, how sharp is that stadium? That stadium is sharp. People are proud of that.
they're proud of the new offices. They're proud that we said we're going to do X, Y, and Z, and we've done X, Y, and Z. Now, have there been hiccups? Has the whole supply chain been shut down during our bond? Yeah, it's hard. There's been material shortages. Okay, this one boggles my mind. There have been 120 RFIs at the middle school alone. Requests for information. This isn't the way that we thought it was going to be. We got to do this, we got to do that. The scope of what the day in and the day out management of that bond, I got to give it up to RC. I don't know how he can do any more work because he does what he does for his job, and then he has to be the person in between who brings in the changeovers, who talks about the progress. Are we going to start school on time? I think what that bond has done for our community has been tremendous. In fact, I was talking to Adam Zettel last week. I think it was last week. And we were talking about the improvement that he's trying to do at the city. We're talking about the improvements that we're doing in Swartz Creek. And I said, one of the things that we promised the community, if you pass this bond, your property values are going to go up. We're going to be a destination district. People are going to come here. And he said, Rod, I have the data that shows that. And not just us and them, but us and them, right? They've been improving the streets. They've been doing things. We've been improving things. And he says our property values have increased during the span of the bond more than most locals. And he said at this point, you can find a ranch in Swartz Creek that has the same value as a ranch in Davison. And before the bond, that did not exist. Swartz Creek was known as some of the cheapest property in the whole county. And so we have increased our property values. So I'm pretty excited about that. The only other thing, Brian, that I'd like to mention in the last 3 years is this whole model of coaching. I have signed up to present with our external coach that we use in the district and Ben to go to MASA and present. It's been a while. I mean, I love presenting, but we haven't, the pandemic shut everything down. I haven't presented in a long time. But that whole coaching model of every principal also needs a coach. So the principal's job is to coach the teacher so the teacher is better, but who's coaching the principal? And that's what we've embraced the last couple of years. And so each principal has either the superintendent, the deputy superintendent coaching them, as well as an external coach. And the progress and the feedback on that's phenomenal. I'd like to keep that going. I'd like to go present about it. I'd like to write about it. I'd like to really dive into that. I think that is a set of supports that most people do not have.
Thanks, Rod. What do you believe are the greatest challenges and opportunities for special education? Please describe your vision and priorities for special education in our district.
Well, if I don't get this answer right, my wife will probably kill me later, right? So let me, and my brother, yeah, sorry. Sorry. I'm sure there's other special ed people in the audience as well. First and foremost, we're all general ed kids first. We're not special ed kids and then everybody else is general ed kids. We are all general ed kids. Special ed kids happen to have a piece of paper that is a legal document that says, I need these kind of supports, right? And so our job is to make sure that those kids who have a legal document to get extra supports, number one, get those supports. If I have a document that says this is what needs to be done, then we should all be following that. That is a legal binding document, and those supports need to happen. So just going through, I think, a great audit of the special ed IEPs. We have the ability right now with our transition, we're still in the process of filling the role of student services director. But one of the very first things that I would task that person to do is to do an IEP audit. I don't think an IEP audit has been done in Swartz Creek in a very long time. What does that look like? Are they getting the services that they say they're getting? That would be a start. I think the other really important thing is, are they in the right environment? You want every student to have the least amount of restriction as possible. That's called the least restrictive environment. Obviously, if I can't handle that as a student in that least restrictive environment, I need to go down a continuum, right? And so what does the next most restrictive look like, and the next, and the next, and the next. I think also just getting people involved in building community together. Students are students. I don't care if they're an ELL student or they have a 504 or they're special ed, they're students. And when you build community, you really pull kids together. One of the great things that we do in Swartz Creek is Special Olympics. We've done Project Unify. We create these opportunities where all students are mixing together, supporting each other, and really building relationships. So you kind of go back to the other research, which is about relationships. When you have a relationship with someone, you have better well-being. So from a technical side, let's look at what we're doing. We have the perfect opportunity with a new person to do a complete audit of our department. What does it look like? How well are we implementing? What is that going to be? And how well are we combining and creating natural social interaction where people just enjoy making connections? And finally, just the only other thing that I would call out is disproportionality. We've been hit a couple of times with that. Our African American students with the IEP have been over-suspended compared to our general population. That's something that comes from the state or the county. It used to come from the state, it comes from the county now. I could let Bob come up here and talk to you about that kind of stuff. It's not my, right? The wonderful thing about special ed is there are very few people that, understand it is a very complex part of schools and the law. So you have to have an expert who understands what's going on there, what that looks like, what are we doing, what's best for kids, and are we following all the legalities? So I would start in those three areas.
Thank you.
Welcome.
What are the immediate challenges and priorities for the district, and how will your background and skills contribute to addressing these challenges and achieving our goals?
Priorities and challenges.
And how will your background and skills contribute to addressing these challenges and achieving our goals? Yeah, challenges and priorities.
Well, I think our priority number one is wrapping everything up and getting ready to go to school. We have a lot to do just from, two big aspects. Number one, from 21-22 to 22-23, we have lost half of the leadership team at central office. So 3 of 6 people. And so we need to transition and make some moves and decide what we're going to do, because school starts in 4 weeks and there's a lot to do behind the scenes. We still have people to be hired. We still have decisions to be made. We still have principal retreats, instructional retreats, PD days that have to be planned. I should ask you guys this question. What do you think? How are we going to prioritize that? Because right now Rod is Rod, Ben, and Derek. And that is crazy. So in all seriousness, there's a lot to do to get ready for work. July is busy at central office. There's a lot of things to get done. And that's from like the instructional, programming, special ed. But then obviously the other side of that is, are we physically going to be ready? We're talking to RC, meeting with Chris, talking about, where are the projects at? What phase are they at? We thought we were going to have curbing. We told Chuck we'd have curbing for this meeting and people could pull right up to the door, and then we don't have curbing. And then I check in with RC today. He's like, oh, we're almost right back on task. I think we'll have curbing on Monday or Tuesday. So, it's just an ebb and flow of what's going well and what's not going well. Where do we need resources? How do we move and shake? I mean, we need to get ready, and that's probably our challenges. Our priorities should be students. Students are our priorities, and going from good to great is our priorities, and following our school improvement goals is our priority. Setting our budget is our priority. I mean, all those things that we have decided that go into the strategic plan, it should be our priority to adopt that plan and get rolling, get it out there. Now, how does Rod help you with those priorities and those challenges? Well, I've been opening school in Swartz Creek for 18 years. I know the community. I'm a community member. I go into almost every business and establishment up and down Miller Road. I frequent and talk to as many people. And in the last 2 weeks, I mean, I have been just flooded with community members texting, social media, emailing me, talking about what about this and what about that. And so I think I have a unique position as being a homegrown candidate to already know the community, to already know the people. I've been having these conversations. I've been visible. I'm out there. Most of them know who I am. So we can, start off pretty quickly. I also think that I have decent communication and relationship skills. And so you need to be able to communicate what we're doing with those challenges. You need to be able to communicate those priorities. And I have a mechanism to do that. And whether that's a newsletter, an email, an update, whatever it is, I'm ready to get that out there. I just told Kevin the other day, be prepared, because when Rod becomes the superintendent of Swartz Creek Community Schools, I need my little email banner go out so I can send out, my monthly updates to the community, And so it's just all of that vision, having that visibility, understanding the community, and communicating what those priorities are. So what if there is a problem with one of those challenges? What if there is a problem with the parking lot? What if I'm not even going to say it, but we got 4 weeks. What if something happens? That's got to be communicated. Who's going to communicate that to the community? Are we ready? Are we not ready? Right? You got to have a plan. You've got to know that school's starting in 4 weeks. You better have a communication ready one way, and you better have a communication ready the other way, because every day it's a different answer that I'm hearing, right? So we got to be ready for that.
Thank you, Rod. I'm going to turn it over now to Alyssa.
Thanks, Brian. So Rod, how would you work to build positive relationships with school board members, individually and as a governing body?
Great question. I love the one-on-ones that are happening. I think probably that's the most important way to build relationships and to build trust and to be authentic, is to have time to meet with you, to talk to you, to understand what your priorities are. I am your liaison to the district. I am your liaison to the community. I need to understand what your priorities are. What do you want in the strategic plan? How do you want policy to change? How do you want the budget spent? That's your job as the board, to set district priorities, set that 30,000-foot view. And if I don't have a relationship with you, if I'm not talking to you, if I'm not meeting with you, how can I possibly do that? If you look in my 100-day plan, there's a whole section, an objective about board governance. So I think that is absolutely the very first thing. I think updates, obviously, you've seen for 2 weeks now, my Monday update. I love Monday updates. I did it at Moorish every Monday for 10 years, and then I did it to the principals for the last 8 years, and I was like, oh, yay, I get a new group to do a Monday update to. And so, I don't know, I hope you read my emails. It's setting the tone for the week. Like, do we know what's happening? I think it's important to know, like, if Chuck has a question or John has a question, like, hey, this come up, like, you guys may have the same question. You may want to know the answer to it. So communicating, hey, someone has an idea. This is what they're thinking, Can we do this? Can we not do that? So, just putting that information out there, being open and transparent. I think board workshops are also a great mechanism. I know that that's one mechanism on training. I know that it's a mechanism on building relationships. We've been using that mechanism lately to start the strategic plan. So obviously, I think, a couple of board workshops soon, just to finish up that process, is very important. So I think, I would like to continue to do the work of getting to know you. I think when you talk about relationships, I've built several relationships with several different constituencies in my time. And sometimes people think they know you and sometimes they don't. And an example of working with me would be this. When you go to a district function, like a PD day or a football game or wherever there's employees and community, and you will see people come up and hug Rod. Some of them are side hugs, some of them are full embraces. You know, sometimes Jim Kitchen knocks me over by smacking me too hard on the back. There'll be fist bumps, handshakes, you know, grab the elbow. I once had my butt slapped at a PD on stage by a teacher who won an award. I'm not sure that was the most appropriate thing, but you know what I'm saying? There's these embraces, right? Well, who are those people that are embracing Rod? Who are they? Well, those are the people, 90% of those people are Moorish staff members that I worked with from 03 to 13 because we built relationships. Who else are they? They're the principals and all of that team that I've worked with in the buildings because for the last 8 years, we've built relationships. They're the central office folks here. We have a lot, 7 or 8 specialists and 6 admin. I think there's 13 or 14 of us. And so when you see someone coming up and embracing Rod and you wonder, why is that person embracing Rod? Now, I do live in the community, so it could be someone I graduated with, right? Like, that's possible. But when it's a district event, those people that embrace me are the people that have worked with me. So if you want to know how people feel about working with me, I think that is probably the biggest example of a testimony that I could give. You know, there's lots of other people, and I think as a superintendent, you got to build different relationships than you did as a principal or as a deputy superintendent. But I hope that gives you a picture of people's warm response to my availability and trust and openness to our relationship. And that's what I would give to you as the Board of Education.
Thank you. So this one's a little longer, so I'm going to read through it first, and then if I need to repeat anything, let me know, okay? So effective stakeholder communication and engagement are vital to the success of any school district. So first question, how will the board, staff, families, and community expect to receive communications and updates from you? You just touched on that a bit, but you can expand. And the second is, how would you solicit input and feedback from the public, and what will you do to foster productive partnerships between the district and the community? And let me know if you want me to repeat anything.
I'm just going to kind of give you back the 3 major parts, and can you just tell me if I'm on, and then I'll tackle each one?
Sure. The first was a statement, and then there were 2 questions.
Right, so there's stakeholders, communication, board staff, and the Creek families. There's feedback from those groups, and then how do I build relationships within the community?
Yes, solicit input and feedback from, the second one is, how would you solicit input and feedback from the public? And what will you do to foster productive partnerships between the district and the community?
That is a big question. Absolutely. I mean, I think that is the role of the superintendent. So, as I just said, 30% of the role of the superintendent is to build relationships with you. The other 30% of the role of the superintendent is to make those connections out to the community and the public, to let them be aware of, to help them have a voice. So I would do updates, whether that's weekly or monthly. I know that we have gotten way better. I've been in Swartz Creek for 18 years, and we've gone over that course of time from very little updates to only emergencies to gathering some feedback. I think we can continue that. I think we can make those updates constant so that I know every single month I'm getting an update. I'm really interested in even writing a blog, and so maybe the update is all the important things happening this month, and oh, by the way, this is the superintendent's blog, this is his thoughts on education. I think there's a lot of ways we can use written communication to reach out to our community. I do think that feedback from the public is very vital. As a taxpayer of Swartz Creek, I want to know what's going on in Swartz Creek. My entire family are taxpayers in Swartz Creek. They want to know what's going on in Swartz Creek, right? So we have to communicate. We have to elicit feedback. One of the things that I've been thinking about as we talk about going from good to great is, do you feel that way? Do you feel we're great? I think there's certain groups that think, oh, we're fantastic, we're over here. And I think there's other groups that think, you know, we're way over here. Well, obviously the truth's in the middle, so let's collect that. I want to know, what do you think of each building? What is the culture like? I think some of those stakeholders are our support staff. How are you enjoying your experience in Swartz Creek? Some of those stakeholders are our certified staff. So we have roughly 220 certified staff, teachers, social workers, principals, speech and language that. We have over 300 support staff, bus drivers, custodians, cooks, secretaries, aides, etc. How is it going? One of the very first things, and I think it's in my 100-day plan, is creating a culture survey. And what is the culture? What is going well? What is not going well? So at MASA, in my resume there, I went to Navigate Leadership. It's basically a pre-superintendent conference. And that's where I learned, like, hey, by the way, you know, if you want to be a superintendent, you got to spend 30% of the time with the board. And the other thing is, you need to sit down with the stakeholders and ask this very simple question. What is going well? What is not going well? Those two questions alone, just sitting down with some representative from every building and then the community in general, will give you a very broad picture. In fact, I did that as an activity of what was going well and what wasn't going well. And as you recall, it ended up leading into the values activity that we then went around to every single stakeholder and talked about what the values are. And I don't know if you knew how that was all put together, but that's how we got family, compassion, excellence, integrity, and continuous learning, because we went out and asked the question. I ran a 100 character, 100 value survey. I did it with you, I think, if you recall. It was kind of, tedious because, you had to stare at 100 and then you had to pick 10 and then I forced you to pick 5 and I kept making you whittle it down and everybody moaned and groaned, but that became our values, right? And think about that. How many school districts do you know where family is the number one value? It wasn't just the overall number one value. I ran this at every building. It was the number one value by building. So it was overall number one, but it was number one by every group. So that is really important, is sitting down, creating surveys, being available for those conversations, collecting the data, and then, like in this example, doing something with it. They became a part of our values. I'm really interested in culture. What does the culture look like? How do you feel it's going? Is it going well? Is it not going well? What can we do as a group to improve schools? You can't get good to great if you just sit and do what you're good at. What's the next best thing we need to improve on? It's communication, it's surveys, it's listening, it's updates.
Thank you. Go ahead, take a drink if you need to.
I was gonna, and just add, part of that visibility, is being out there. So I was just at Chamber this week. I go to Rotary International. I've been to Kiwanis to update them. Chamber just gave us an award, actually. I was going to talk about it at the next board meeting, but I guess I can give away a hint. But basically, it was for every single one of us in Swartz Creek for our commitment to the students. And so we were the STARS 2022 award. And it was for our work through the pandemic. Every single one of us in the entire organization. I thought that was pretty cool. So I'll speak more to that at a later date, but those are those groups that, that enjoy being a part of, and they enjoy helping, and they want to give back to the kids. I mean, it was a pretty heartfelt award, and they were just very appreciative of, and we've talked about it, all the hard work that happened during the pandemic.
Thanks, Ron. So please share your vision for improving equity for all students. What will you do to support students of color, and how will you attract and retain a diverse staff?
Equity is so important. Every child in our district, no matter the background they come from, whether it's socioeconomic, whether it's a racial demographic, whether it's because they have special needs or whatever, every single student needs the same opportunity for success. That's the vision. Every student should have an opportunity for success. The way we do that well is that umbrella of MTSS. We create tiers, we look at data, and we make sure that our kids who are not making successful choices or are struggling get the supports that they need. We've been running data meetings for over 10 years, and that means looking at an individual and seeing where the growth, where the opportunity is to grow for every student across the district. We have benchmarking in the entire district. One of those things that we talked about, some things changing at the state. I said 10 years ago, it'd be really nice if the state would ever kind of adopt an MTSS model and go away from solely relying on standardized testing. Well, it's been a couple years now, but they finally kind of threw in, hey, you're all going to do benchmarking. Oh, and by the way, MTSS made it into 31A at-risk laws. So, like, the very thing we've been doing forever is actually now basically law. You have to provide interventions. You have to look at data. You have to make some steps. And so living under that umbrella, I think, is how you provide equity for all students. Specifically, equity, we started a book study at the end of the year with the principals on equity. And what does equity inclusion look like? We just hired Ryan Smith as the principal at Deke Elementary. Ryan is an expert in equity. It was some of the work that he worked on in Novi, so picking his brain and just bringing to light all of those things that we learn into the systems that we already do. I mean, that the basis of a tiered system is to provide equity for everyone. I think when you talk about hiring practices, we have been working very hard on that. I said a long time ago, like, this is our student population. We're at about 18 to 20% minority population. And 5, 6, 7 years ago, we had 2 out of 500 staff members who were minority. And so you've got to go purposely look at a larger pool. You always want to find amazing candidates, but you want to find amazing candidates who can make connections, because it goes back to that, do I have a connection with that kid? And the kids got to be able to ask themselves, do I see people in my building who look like me, who act like me, who think like me, who talk like me? That is so important. How can you get that connection, that one connection with every kid to every adult, if you don't have representation? And so the biggest way you do that from an HR perspective is you expand the pools. You got to have a great, big, talented pool so that when you look at and hire, you're bringing in people into the district who look like the kids who are in the district. So I think that's important work, and it's something that we've always had our thumb on.
All right, so now we're going to turn it over to Jack. Thank you, Jack.
That's better. Mr. Heatherton, how would you manage criticism on social media regarding the superintendent, administrators, school district, and staff?
Well, I guess that comes with the territory, right? I mean, social media is a whole new beast that we've been living with for the last 10 years. I think as you're a public person, you just, most of the time, 80% of the time, 90%, I don't know what the real percentage is, but you got to let it go. There are so many battles and people who are just trying to goat you into battles. I know plenty of colleagues, and myself included, who have been tried to goat into battles on social media for years. And you just can't take the bait. You don't get involved in social media battles. I have a presence on Twitter where, we were doing this chat and we were reaching out to the world talking about great things in education. And then, Twitter kind of went south. And, I decided long ago to open up all my social media and make it public. You want to come snoop about Rod? You want to come find out? Great. I talk about really positive quotes. I talk about my family. I talk about U of M football. And I talk about my faith. So you can scroll for a good 5 years. You're going to see the same thing. That's what I put out there. I don't really think that's where good dialogue comes in. You want to really impact people and relationships, you got to sit down with them and listen to them. Nothing good happens from engaging with someone who wants to purposely be negative and only portray one side of the story. I find that people who are negative on social media are purposely putting out half the story. Well, as public officials, you can't tell the whole story of everything you know about everybody in your community. Well, number one, that's illegal. It's not ethical. So I don't think you engage in that. That's the restraint side of being a public official. The other side of that, however, is you hire someone like Michelle Corbett to be your social media liaison.
Where's she at?
you know? I mean, listen, if you don't tell your story, you're creating a void. And if you have a void, people are going to fill that with negativity. So when we purposely put things out there and share our stories and find students who are doing good things and adults who are doing good things and sharing those stories, you're telling your story. You're letting people have a window into what's happening in the district. So the absence of information and communication, that void becomes negativity. So from a personal standpoint, practice some restraint. From a global district perspective, share your story. Show what's going on. One of the greatest communication tools when at elementary, when social media first come out, was these personal Facebook groups, and moms and dads could see what their 30 little kids were doing in second grade, and like, oh my gosh, you know, today we investigated whether, you know, an egg would burst or bounce or balance, or today we built a bridge, or you know, we did this activity with M&Ms and then we ate them, you know. And do you remember the day when you would ask your child when they came home, what did you do in school? Nothing. Well, what an opportunity to just follow along, and some of our teachers are so fantastic at, hey, this is what we did in school. So I think there are great opportunities for that.
Thank you. How would you interact with administrators, and how will you strike a balance between giving them support and autonomy they need to lead effectively while holding them accountable? Please provide examples of how you have worked with principals to improve their performance.
That's a great question.
Thank you.
That's the essence of the warm demander, right? When I first was at Morris, we had someone in doing brain research, and that person called it, compassionately assertive. Compassionately assertive. Warm demander. Support accountability. It doesn't matter what you call it. It's setting the expectation, living the expectation, but then also having the hard conversations. We've read 3 different book studies in this group of principals solely on just having the hard conversation. And we're actually going to talk about it again. I was recently, you know, having a great conversation with our union president, and she said, Rod, we just need to have more hard conversations. And I said, you're right, we do. We need to increase it. We know this. We've been talking about it. We need to continue to have even harder conversations. But, you know, sometimes, you know, people think, oh, well, you got this relationship with the administrator. Oh, you're going to be so easy on them. Well, that's kind of a unfair, you know, way to look at it, because I hire an administrator and you want me to build a relationship with him because relationships are so important. And then I build a relationship with an administrator and you say, oh, well, you have a relationship with an administrator. Well, that's what I was supposed to do, right? The tough part or the high character part is to have the hard conversation. So I have had hard conversation with administrators. And I think in Jim Kitchen's letter of reference, he mentions having those hard conversations. I have had multiple hard conversations with the principal. I mean, that's all I can say right now on that, because it's happened. I've had those conversations. I can't get into what those conversations were, but believe me, it's happened. And guess what? I'm not the kind of guy who has a friend, let's do a baseball analogy. I'm not the kind of guy, if you're my friend or you're my buddy, that you get to bat first. I'm the kind of guy that if you're my friend or you're my buddy, guess what? You're batting 5th or 6th and go prove yourself. Because I love people and I love relationships and I love to work with people. And if I'm your friend, I'm going to be your best friend. But I don't know if you really want to work with me, because guess what? We're going to do great things. We're going to go from good to great. I have high expectations, and my principals know that. I am fun to work with. I do engaging activities at our meetings. We are up and moving. They're like, oh my gosh, are we doing speed dating again? Yes, we are. Yeah, we're going to move and we're going to talk. But I'm not afraid to pull people in and have the hard conversation. I've done it over and over again. It's not the most enjoyable part of the job, but I think if you have high expectations, you have to follow through. I mean, that's what you're hiring me to do, right? You don't want inappropriate or poor behavior in your district, do you, right? You want it called out, and I'm not afraid to do that.
Thank you. How would you assess the current culture and climate of the district, and what would you personally do to impact it?
That's as I've said numerous times, that's what I want to do. Like, that is the thing that keeps me up at night, is what should be on the culture survey, what questions should I ask, how soon should should we start school, should we not start school, how is it really going? I want to know what is the real culture. I want to know. A culture of learning is all about creating opportunities, empowerment for everyone. If our staff feels empowered to take risks and do things, they're more likely to take that approach with their students. And our students feel empowered to take risks and do things, then they're going to learn things that they would never have done if they weren't empowered to take risks and do things. So I want to get a culture survey out there. It's probably one of my top priorities. And as far as impacting culture, if you read through my 5 letters of rec, it all talks about Rod as a culture builder. Rod is someone, and like I said, it was the example of when you see people come up and hug me, those are the people who have worked closest with me. I'm sure there are people who don't want to hug me, but that's either goes back to your other conversation, maybe something happened that we had to have a hard conversation about, or maybe it's because we just haven't had the opportunity to have that close relationship and work with each other. So, oh man, I love culture. I love culture, and I think we should get at it.
Thanks, Rod. With that, I will hand it over to the man on my left, Mr. Chuck Melkey.
Okay, Mr. Rod. These are easy ones,
All right.
but they're open-ended.
Are you promising, Chuck?
They're open-ended, I never promise. What do you believe is the gap or opportunity within our current district structure, and how would you address that?
Current gap?
What do you believe is the current gap or opportunities with our current district structures, and how would you address that?
Well, I think that two answers to that. Number one, the current gap by far is what has happened from the pandemic. Bar none, there is no bigger gap in our district. And that's the social emotional learning gap that we're addressing, but it's also the academic gap. All across the country, we've lost 2 years of learning. I read an article the other day that said that group of students is going to be like 10 years behind forever, right? That's the gap. And you saw progress. Last year was our first full year of getting back to data analysis, and you saw that movement from the fall to the spring. And so there's hope, but there's a lot of work to be done. And I'm glad that we have the structures that we have, because that's where you look at gap analysis. And I'm going to be pretty demanding on that instructional team to make sure we're all doing the same thing to increase those gaps, or to decrease those gaps and increase that engagement. From a structural standpoint, I think that anytime you have an opportunity, one of the reasons we've done so well in Creek over the last few years is we've always changed and modified positions if people retire. And if we don't have to replace a position through attrition, then we save money. And so I think you should always ask yourself, instead of, is this who I need? Like, what is the talent of the next person, and what's their best talent, and how can we use them? So I think right now, obviously, the biggest issue from my standpoint is we have 3 of our 6 central office people gone. How are we replacing them? How quick are we replacing them? Are they experts, and are they going to come in and roll by September?
Okay, next one. Please talk about the most difficult decisions you've had to make in your educational career, and describe the process you used to make those decisions and how you resolve those issues.
There's a lot of difficulty in education. There's difficult conversations. There's difficult decisions. There's just difficult circumstances because life happens. But if you wanted me to walk through like a decision-making tree, I would say that probably the hardest thing is a couple years ago we were faced with, what was it, like $8,000 to $1,000 per kid decrease?
Right.
And so we had to go and bargain with every group. A couple of them came to the table, and we created a tiered system. Like, if it's a $500 loss per kid, I'm going to give up 1%. If it's an $800 loss per kid, we're going to give up 1.5%. If it's a $1,000 loss per kid, we're going to give up 2%. And a couple of the groups came and played ball, and that was great, because if that happened, it would have been devastating. You talk about how excited I am to have $450 per kid. I have never in my lifetime ever seen a decrease of $1,000. It would have devastated us. But that's what the state was saying. That's what the legislative groups were saying. That's what everyone was saying. And I think it's just so unfortunate that public schools have to have their budget in by June 30th, but the state of Michigan doesn't have to have their budget till October. That puts us in a bind every year, and so you're guessing and you're projecting. So that year we had to take a look at who we were going to lay off, and the laws have changed now. So now you go by evaluation, and so you had to take a look at everybody's evaluation, and then you have to get in the 1248 factors. So what does attendance look like? What does discipline look like? Do I have the ability to function as an educator? What does that look like? And so now you go through this matrix of, okay, here's all the evaluation. Here's all the people who have discipline issues. Here's all the people who have attendance issues. And you have to start ranking and sorting. It took our admin team 2 days to get through that process, and we ended up having to do 10 people on the layoff list because we thought we were going to be cut $1,000. And then you have to start communicating those layoffs. Those are the hardest decisions ever, to say, we just don't have the money to employ you anymore. Fortunately, as you know, it never progressed to that point. By the time we got to the vault, it said, okay, you're even. Right. And so I think through attrition, we got that list down to 5. So I don't think even the 10 that were on the list knew it. The 5 or 6 did, because we only got half of it down because of attrition and movement and restructuring. And we always talk about how can we be more efficient, as we're constantly creating our models to be more efficient. I think the 4 or 5 were communicated with, but then by the fall, we didn't get cut and everyone came back. But look at that. You just spent 3 months going through this very hard decision-making tree, deciding who's not going to have a job, having to communicate with some of them that they weren't. And then in the end, because of the way the financial structures are set up, we didn't have to go through that process. That's just, the way that happens like that just saddens me, but it is the reality of our system right now.
And describe the extent of your experience in managing facilities and operations, including bond sinking funds and other expenditures in general.
Well, as you know, as a part of the bond, the first bond since like 1970, I mean, I was literally out there hammering the big old signs with Ben all over the, with our big old, I don't even know what we had, sledgehammers, and putting them in the ground. So being on the bond steering committee has been my favorite part of the bond, watching the progress go through, analyzing the projects, making sure we're on task, being within budget. Obviously, some things come in under budget. What helps you when some things don't come in under budget, right? But overall, we've been able to accomplish, at this point, 90% of everything we said we were going to. Now, we have a 20-year sinking fund. That sinking fund comes due in 2030, right? So we need to go back out to the public in 2030 and say, hey, the sinking fund no longer exists. Can you do us a renewal? Anytime you do a renewal is great, because a renewal is zero. It just says, can you continue to do what you're doing? And that provides us great things for summer work, and whether that's painting and roofs or furnaces or replacements. Those are all, RC's amazing. We've been talking back and forth. I've been available to him to answer his questions 24/7, to give some ideas, to give a yes or a no. And then probably just in my expertise to this point, it's the millions of dollars in grant funds. I've been deeply involved in Title I, Title II, Title III, Title IV. I've been deeply involved in 31A, and that's millions and millions of dollars, and all of that feeds into our student services. It feeds into the support we're talking about. It feeds into making a difference. I've sat down with Chris already. We've talked about the budget. We've talked about the new legislation and what has been approved, and we've talked about things where we might actually, be a little bit better off because some of these categoricals. I personally would like to see us take some of that money and expand our work with social work. Maybe we can expand our police officers with more safety money. And there's opportunities when it's on the good side to do good things. So lots of different little accounts I've personally been involved with, but just overall as facilities, just kind of being that person that gives direction and has that 30,000-foot view and gives a lot of support. I mean, we talk about going good to great. You got to have that team and the right people on the right bus. Having someone like Chris Gray who knows how to do a budget, having someone like RC who knows how to run facilities, those are all important pieces of the puzzle.
Okay, thanks, Rod. Yes.
Thanks. Let me know. Can you hear me okay?
I'm good.
Okay, great. And I'll even try to speak up a little bit.
If you would, please describe your experience with budget development and financial management. How would you ensure that we maintain a healthy fund balance that will align with spending and strategic priorities?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's two basic ways you can approach the budget. You can kind of do the whole rollover and start again next year and hope everything falls into the right category, which is the way we did it in Swartz Creek for 50 years. Or you can do zero-based budgeting, which is what we've done for the last 3 years or so. And the difference is literally that. In a rollover budget, you're rolling everything over. You're rolling over your line items, you're rolling over your categories, and you're just rolling over. And you hope that the way you operate this year is similar to the way you operated last year, and hence you still fall, in the black. Zero-based budgeting means you wipe it down to zero and you say, these are our priorities. I want to hire a nurse. I want to hire a new social worker. I want to hire a new police officer. I want to hire a new speech and language person. And then you put those in the budget and you work that budget out. And being able to have direction from you as an oversight of what that budget looks like, and then being able to talk to Chris about where I think the programming priorities are. And so from your 30,000-foot view of saying this is what our priorities are, for me taking that strategic plan or just the priorities conversations and saying this is what I know the programming priorities are, and this is what the board said their priorities are. These are where we need to create the line items, and then that's how you put the budget together. And that's why Chris has so much time in extensive spreadsheets, is because every year she starts from scratch and creates those line items and talks about what we need in each area. It creates a much better outcome at the end of the year if you can know where those line items are and be conservative in your approach, because you haven't just rolled everything over.
During tougher financial times, school districts can be presented with difficult budget limitations and decisions. What would be your top 2 to 3 priorities when presented with those limitations and decisions?
Anytime there are cuts to the budget, your number one priority are students. Anytime we talk about anything, our number one priority is students. You want to keep those cuts away from the students as much as possible. I just talked about all the ways we can expand our services. Obviously, if there's cuts to the budget, you then have to work opposite and start reducing those services. I think the 3 priorities to me, and it depends on the season and the day, that they sometimes change in order, so not in any particular order, but safety has to be an absolute priority. We're expected to have a safe campus. We're expected to have safe entries. We're expected to have people who keep us safe. That's a priority. Social emotional wellness. We just talked about all night about how kids have come out of the pandemic. We have to have resources there for social emotional wellness and academics. The teacher in the classroom is the most powerful tool. It has the most research-based impact on student learning, is that person standing in front of a kid. Our 3 priorities are our teachers in the classrooms and the academics. It's our social emotional wellness, and it's our safety. I can't think of anything else that would move into the top 3.
Thanks. In your career, what is the biggest risk you have taken to do what is right for children?
The biggest risk that I have taken for what is right for children? That is an amazing question. I've had a lot of difficult conversations with people about, what is for the good of a child. I have ripped up referrals before because it wasn't for the good of a child. It wasn't right. I've had to have hard conversations with adults before because what was happening was not for the good of a child. Most recently, when we went around, Derek and I, when we had the disproportionality, we went around and we had those conversations. And the response of most meetings was, well, but the kid did X, and so they get consequence Y. And I'm like, understand that, but this group keeps getting put out more than this group, so you can say that, but it's not matching up to the data. And so ironically, 20 years ago, I was sitting in my office as a 29-year-old assistant principal, and an African-American father came into my office, and he sat down. I had just suspended his kid for 5 days for fighting. And he said, you know that we are creating a pipeline to prison. So if you've read the book, Pipeline to Prison, it's all about how the African-American community, because of the way everything is set up, they end up incarcerated more. That's disproportionality at a different level. But the disproportionality that we talk about in schools is over suspension. He's like, African-American males are being suspended more. And you know what I said to that father? I said, but I did the investigation, and your son, did the crime, and that's why I gave him that consequence. And then 20 years later, I'm trying to explain the exact opposite. What probably the most insightful reflection I've had when I'm now giving the response that we need to clean up disproportionality, and people are throwing, into my face the very thing I threw into that father's face 20 years ago. I mean, that to me, that was just a deep reflection for me on, what we all are at different points, but we all really need to have a higher awareness of what is good for kids, and especially if the data shows it. If the state and the county is coming in and says this is the data, that's the data. Like, you can't argue data. You can argue how it got there. Is it because certain groups were sent down to the office more frequently? Is it because when they were sent to the office, different things happened? I mean, there's 100 different scenarios between A and B, but you can't argue the outcome, right? And so I've had a lot of those difficult conversations at every building about disproportionality, because it's right for our kids to make sure that any group, you asked me a question about equity. Well, is it equitable that one group is getting suspended twice as much as any other group? It's not. And so those are hard conversations.
Okay, so this is the final formal question of the evening.
Yay.
What specific qualities and experience set you apart from others and will be important for the continued success of Swartz Creek students, staff, and schools? And I would encourage you, Rod, in there to identify areas that you're working on as an educational professional, and those things that I think you excel at.
I think personally, my qualities are, I will work hard. I'm a hard worker. I'm honest. I'm going to tell you the truth. I'm very straightforward. I think you've heard people talk about the vision that I've had, and just understanding people and where they are. I thought you were going to ask me the weakness question, and I was going to be like, well, I'm really straightforward.
Did I mention formal question?
Some people say, well, geez, Rod's so straightforward. I read a quote the other day that said, we are at such a place in our society that people are not authentic, they're political, they're misleading, and they're misguiding, that when someone steps up and is authentic and honest, nobody believes them. They don't know how to handle them, or they see them as aggressive. And that I looked at that statement, I thought that is really just such an awful reflection of where we are. But I am who I am, and I'm going to be straightforward and honest, and I'm going to tell you the way I think it is. So I think the other big thing for me is being a community member. I really think that this community is longing for a Swartz Creek community member, a resident, to be a part of this district. I don't know if we've ever had a Swartz Creek community member be a superintendent. I just know that of all the community members that have reached out to me, I had one particular guy, he's talked to me for 2 years. You're a community member, you're a community member. I'm like, yeah, well, at some point, I'm sure I'll get an opportunity, But I do think being in the community, being visible, being at events, I just I get out there, I enjoy it, I like being with our community, I am a part of this community, and I don't know how you could have anyone else come in from this community with my fit and my qualifications and experiences and lead from that standpoint. I can think of no one. And that's what I'm prepared to do. I'm prepared to take that hard work. You talk to the principals about our leadership meetings. We're prepared to work on culture. We're going to be working on equity. We're going to robustly even do more that we've done with our MTSS. Kevin's working on completing an entire handbook. I'm going to present a handbook this year that is top to bottom everything we do in MTSS. It's going to talk about behavior. It's going to talk about academics. It's also going to talk about wellness. We need to move away from behavior data. It's not just how many people got how many referrals. It's, are you well? Are you well? And what does the wellness data look like? There are all sorts of companies. In fact, we had one show up in the spring, and they presented to us 3 times, and I was really excited, and the team said, we're just not quite ready. But the companies are now coming out with wellness data. That's the next frontier. How do we know if our kids are well? And what are we going to do? And some of them are great, because it's not just like, oh, overall, there's not a lot of wellness here, but also let's connect these 2 or 3 adults with that particular person. So now when there's an individual pattern, oh, this child has not been well for 3 or 4 weeks, these 3 or 4 adults, trusted adults, can reach out to that. And so I just think, as a community member who loves Swartz Creek and just loves living in here and just loves being here and just wants to push that fearless dragon forward, but then also doing all the work that we've done, I think that's a great combination, and that's what I'm excited about.
Thanks, Rod. So now I'm going to use the chair's prerogative, and there were several board members that came to the table tonight with additional questions. And I would ask that you keep it to no more than 2 questions per person. If your questions have not already been answered by Rod's answers or questions asked by the other board members. So I know, Jack, you had a couple questions that you wanted to add.
Yes, I do. I guess I'll start here, Rod. You actually just about kind of mentioned it. It was the weaknesses question. What are some of your largest areas of weakness? But on top of that, how would you actually overcome and beat those weaknesses moving forward if they came into play?
Yeah, absolutely. I actually had an amazing coaching conversation with Michelle Wildy. Michelle is someone who's gone to cognitive coaching and has really expressed a desire to be more of that coach for people. And it's not just our coaches and our principals, our teachers that need coaching. We should all have coaching. And she's like, hey, can I just talk to you today? And we had this amazing hour conversation just about opportunities, weaknesses. If you look at a lot of personality indexes, they'll talk about shadow areas. Everybody has a shadow area. You may be, and I am, considered on one inventory a change agent. But if you're under stress or you're living in your shadow, then you're looked at as manipulative. You could be someone who is a traditionalist, but if you're living in your shadow area, you are stuck and refuse to move forward. You could be someone who is considered a warrior, a fighter, and just tackles anything. But if you're living in your shadow area, then you're just trying to constantly create battles. You could be someone it's called a destroyer. You constantly want to move and change things, because if you take things out of a system, new things can grow. But if you're living in your shadow area, you're destroying everything, right? So it doesn't matter. There's so many indexes out there. Pick one. But what you have to do is do the work on yourself. You have to have those coaching conversations. You have to identify your own shadow areas. You have to identify when you're not in the right place, and you have to reflect on that and get better at yourself. And we didn't talk a lot about it, but being a lifelong learner is kind of that. Like, I expect that of myself. I am a lifelong learner. I don't really use the word fail a lot. I don't really use the word mistake. I mean, I use the word like, let's get to work, right? And so I think we talked a lot tonight about doing the work of the district. The leader still has to do the work on themselves. And I think through some of those really deep conversations, you can do that work.
Thank you, Rod. And my next question, I've actually received in the last 2 weeks a few calls, a couple texts, and an email or two about this. And I'm going to assume that you know what I'm talking about, but first I'll ask just in case. Have you ever heard of or do you know what critical race theory is?
Yeah, I have heard of that. It's basically something that has come out of a master's level college class.
Okay, now with that, I was asked to ask you from the community what your thoughts and feelings are on the matter, and as it would relate towards public education, our curriculum and such, as well as hiring practices, if you would ever implement critical race theory.
So, I mean, that's kind of a tricky question. I mean, if you, I can give you a political answer, I could give you a real answer. I mean, we just asked all night about equity, and a lot of what critical race theory produces is equity. So we can all nod our head that we need equity, but if I call it critical race theory, then half of the country is mad at me, right? So, I mean, what do I believe in equity? Absolutely, I believe in equity. Every kid should have an opportunity to learn. Do I believe critical race theory is taught in public schools? No. It's a master's level course at college. I know, I've been in school for 26 years. I know of no actual district teaching critical race theory. So the answer is, am I bringing in critical race theory? No. Am I teaching equity and inclusion? Yes.
Good answer. And Madam President, I have one more if you want. I can leave it out. It's a third.
Why don't you let Chuck do his?
All right.
Well, I can wait.
Okay, all right, go ahead.
All right.
Yeah, I'm enjoying everybody else's stuff.
All right, last question
That's the
again.
fun part.
Wow, one more.
Rod's been run through the ringer already, so.
Again, this one.
Starting to sweat.
This one again is from a community question, and it's in relation to this transgender issue. We've seen nationwide just some incidents, and I know it's not the majority, and of course, it doesn't matter where you stand on the actual issue, whether you support or disagree, whatever. But the community member wanted to know that what your thoughts and feelings and how you would react if a situation like what happened in, Pennsylvania, where that young boy went into the girls' bathroom and then acts were committed. They want to know how you would handle such a situation in Swartz Creek if a transgender student was to try and play a sport that they weren't, or a female sport as a male student, for instance, or if they were a male student going into the female locker room and such. The community member wanted to know how you personally would react to that and what you would do.
So again, another very political question. I have actually never heard of the Pennsylvania situation, and I haven't heard of people who have actually been accosted because of that type of particular environment. I'm going to go back to two things. Number one, all kids have to give opportunities to learn and grow and be safe. So whatever we do in this district, kids have to be safe, and they have to have the opportunity to learn and grow. Now, you as a board, if you want to set specific policies to that and tell me how to enact that, I'll be glad to follow your lead.
Thanks, Jack. Did you want your turn, Chuck?
Ask one and pass.
Sure.
You've answered this, Rod, kind of. You have a good relationship with the staff because you've worked here for a long time. As always, half the people love you, half the people hate you.
I think I'm more than half on love.
Okay, 60%. So let's talk about the other 40%. As superintendent, you're going to be in controlled discipline. And I came from a union strong background, and I know that you can say that you never take that into account, but we're all humans, and we take it in nature. Can you, and I think you can, you have pretty good integrity from what I can see. You can keep that fair with the people that you like and the people you dislike, or, some favorites and not favorites. When it comes to discipline, it'll be doled out the same to everyone, and everybody's treated fairly, the staff anyways, when it comes to that. And I think I know the answer, but I'm asking it.
Absolutely.
Okay,
So
good.
I will tell you that I have written up friends.
Yep.
So yes, I can take care of discipline.
Okay.
And I will also tell you that we follow due process. So first of all, it's not like I'm not a friend to anyone. I mean, I have some relationships with people and I have better relationships with other people. I think we all deserve to be in this community and excel and whatnot. If you're not excelling, if you're making poor choices, then yeah, we have to have a conversation, and we've done that. I have sat, with Ben in this last 3 or 4 years on the lawyer with just hours of questions. And I think sometimes people think, oh, there's someone over there at central office, in the ivory tower waving the flag and making some crazy decision. That is not what happens. We have a very robust team of lawyers. We have a very robust central office team, and we have a very robust principal team. So anytime somebody does something inappropriate, it's not like there's one person making a decision. It's ours with lawyers. What's the legal ramifications? What's due process look like? Did the person do the deed? Did they get questioned about it? Did they give an opportunity to actually answer the question? That. And then from a central office standpoint, okay, what do you guys think? This is what the lawyer said. What do the 6 of us think? Like, has it been a pattern of behavior? Is it happening over and over again? Is it getting worse? Is it getting out of control? It's just like student discipline. It's an investigation, right? And is it ramping up? Is it out of the ordinary? And then after that layer, you have to sit with the principal. Like, hey, you know what? This behavior happened in your building. And if I'm coming over as superintendent, then it's pretty serious, because quite honestly, if you're the principal, you need to take care of your building. I don't need to be coming over there and telling you how to take care of your building. If I'm coming over there, I've already talked to the lawyer. I've already talked to my HR person, who happens to be a lawyer. Yay. Yeah. And so we're going to have the hard conversation. So I love people. I'm not going to back down from the hard conversation.
Hopefully it's not one of the principals. Thanks. I'll hold off for a minute, Carrie, that's all. But I kind of knew the answer.
Thanks, Sean. So Jessica, I think you had a couple questions.
Yes.
Okay, sure.
Are there any significant deviations in our current processes or procedures based on what we have been doing with your predecessor that you significantly would like to change or see changed? And is there a timeline for that for you?
Honestly, I think we're in a great place. When I say I want to take us from good to great, that's because we're in a good place. We're not in a bad place. There is so much continuity. We've worked so hard. I've worked with 3 different superintendents. They've all worked hard. They've all actually, if you look back over 20 years, put us on a trajectory where this superintendent took us to here, this superintendent took us to here, and this superintendent took us to here. I want to do the same thing. I'd like to maybe do 2 steps up, right? And I think we're on a good place. What would I like to change? I don't know what that answer is, because as I've said, I want to find out what people really think. What is the culture? And then when you're sitting down and having those conversations about what's going well, what's not going on well, or what's the 1 to 10 score on your culture or on your climate of your building, then we can talk about, do we need, so you look at the 100-day plan, that's at the end of the 100 days. First, you got to collect the data. First, you got to have conversations. First, you got to be out there really understanding how do people really feel. I think one of the advantages, so earlier I said it was a weakness, now I'm going to flip on you. I think it is an advantage to be straightforward. I'm going to ask you to tell me. I think it was in Dr. Hartley's letter. He said, Rod asks the hard questions, and that made me a better assistant superintendent. Well, that's who I am. I ask hard questions because I want to know the answer. Not because, there's something wrong, because we're trying to learn and improve, right? And so I think there's a lot of things that we can dive into, but I love where we are. I'm a part of where we are. I've done a lot of work, and, I've worked with very different people, The last 3 superintendents are very different people, and I've worked well with all of them. And I hope that's an indication to you that, I work well with different people. All I want to do is see us be a successful school district.
There was one, you've already kind of talked about it a little bit with Ms. Wildley, but will you have a mentor, and that the outside coach, will you continue to have coaching as well? Because you get to the top as the superintendent, and it's not like the superintendent doesn't need coaching.
Oh, absolutely. That's that whole lifelong learning. I have had multiple coaches in my life. I now, at this point in my career, have multiple people who are really good colleagues who have moved on to higher positions, a lot of them, right? And so those people, I mean, I've been collaborating with Dr. Hartley for 20-some years. We first met in the MPA program back at U of M in like, I don't know, 99 or something, right? You know, so I think, and that goes to that whole, will you collaborate across districts? Absolutely. So yeah, I have a lot of mentors in my life. I have a lot of people that have moved on to superintendent positions before I have. Those are great people to call. But also just from a strictly coaching model, Julia, who's been our outside coach, has been tremendous. Every single principal was coached by her last year, as well as me. So absolutely, I love to learn and grow, and we will continue the mentorship.
Thank you, Jessica. Brian, did we answer your questions?
My questions have been answered.
Thank you very much. All right, Rod, now is your opportunity to put us on the hot seat and ask us some questions if you have any. And if you don't, that's fine too.
Yeah, I do have a question that, so I have studied superintendent interviews a lot. I have watched many superintendent interviews over the last 5 years, and there's always interesting questions. But one of the questions that always comes up from the board to a superintendent candidate is, would you move into the district? Would you be a part of the community? Would you be more visible? Are you willing to uproot your family? Well, as you know, I'm already a community member. So what would it mean to you individually to have someone who is a citizen, a community member, a taxpayer, be the superintendent of Swartz Creek Community Schools?
Anybody want to start?
Oh, I can, okay. I don't know that I got an answer for this just yet.
You can take your time.
Yes. I think it's absolutely incredible that we finally do, because I can't recall any superintendents in my lifetime being a Swartz Creek alumni. You would be, I think, the first. But I truly believe that's a gem for us. That's a diamond. That's a win for us. Win-win. You know the people. You know the culture. You know the school. You've been on this trajectory with us, and you've actually led a lot of where we are today at being good. And I think we're in between good and great right now. And you've been a person very much responsible for that. You and the collaboration with Ben have been the dynamic duo. I mean, you guys have been great. So I can't say enough about you being a resident, a taxpayer, involved in alumni. You know the people here, you know the system. And I think that's incredibly good.
Okay, I took my time. I do agree with Brian. I think that is a huge benefit for us. But I guess my answer to that would be, it would be unique. I think it is unique in the industry, because like you said, most times you're not getting somebody of the caliber, the expertise, and the interest truly homegrown out of your community. I think it does lend us to the benefit that, and I can say personally, I have experienced this in our relationship over decades at this point, that you bring the ability to look at things from multiple perspectives. So it's not just as a professional, as a coach or a leader, but also as a father, a homeowner, a community member. That gives us that unique ability to tap into your views from all those different areas. As well, though, I will say, sometimes it's nice to have an outside view of somebody that's not within the community. But I think the positive attributes that you can bring to that will be more of a benefit than a hindrance.
So when I think about this more generally, and not you specifically, I think about it as both a strength and a weakness, potentially. A strength being, someone in this position would have connections, relationships, experience in the district, know quite a bit about it. So anyone that comes from outside has a learning curve there. weakness, sometimes in organizations or communities, you get kind of navel gazing, this is the way we've always done it, not maybe open to change as much, so enthralled with it. I'm not worried about this here because I've been so impressed. Some of you don't know me. I'm by no means an expert, but I've had the opportunity to be at different levels in the education realm in Michigan, State Department of Education boards, committees, et cetera, worked with a lot of folks at different levels of education. And I've been extremely impressed about how Swartz Creek is innovative, tries to use best practice. We still have a ways to go, definitely, to be great. I'm not happy about our numbers academically and the disproportionality. But I don't feel like we're insular, so I don't feel like that's a weakness in this case because I've gotten to know you a bit and through the committees and just learning about the work. We're looking outside of the creek and bringing in and then molding it to make it fit the culture here and do what's best for kids. So I don't see it as a weakness in this case, but I was just saying generally I might think about it that way.
Jack?
Really, I have nothing else to add on to what they said. I would echo it, and I don't want to be long-winded about it, so I just echo everything they said, the concerns, also the positives. That's all I have.
Thank you. Chuck?
I don't think I have anything to add. I'm comfortable with Rod. Whenever I've asked him a question, and I'm a very direct person, he knows this, he gives me the answer, and I appreciate that. Whether I like the answer or not, I get the answer, and that's what I want. My only reservation is what I already mentioned, when you grow through an organization, and I've been in several public organizations, that sometimes there's that, but I feel comfortable that Rod's not going to let that interfere in his performance. And I'd like somebody that's vested in the community, that's paying taxes, that has family members here, that knows the area. It kind of gives him a benefit so he doesn't have to figure out where's this person coming from or what's their goal or angle. So I think that's all good, positive things. I don't really see a lot of negative. I just like competition, but hey, you're it, buddy. and you said, hey, you got all these big goals to do. And if it was me, just up to me, I'd say, okay, we're gonna appoint you in about 3 or 4 weeks. Get all that stuff done, and let's see how you do. Put you on a test run, and then that kind of makes you really hustle and put you at your game. But I'm confident you'll get everything done that you can, or if you can't, there'll be a good reason, a legitimate reason why you can't. So I don't know where I'm at with it, Rod, but you'll do a good job. You better, because you live in the community. That's kind of it. That's where it's at, right? You can't run and hide somewhere if you leave. And it's like you have a problem. It's like, oh boy, well, I live down here, 60 miles here. I'll just move and nobody will see me again. So you're a homegrown boy, so you have a vested interest in making the district great, as you said. So I think that'll help us.
Jessica?
Thank you, Carrie.
Thank you, Chuck.
I don't know that I have much more to add to those comments because I agree. Anytime, if you're an outsider, there are benefits to it and there are downsides to it. If you're local, there are benefits to it and there are downsides to it, right? Everybody knows you can't avoid it sometimes, but that's okay. The cool thing to me is that you are willing to embrace that, right? And it struck me, I had not realized that we have not had a superintendent, at least the last 3 that have lived in the district.
Charles Townsend was the last one, I believe, that actually lived in the district for quite, not just, but I'm just
You're
saying,
fine, yeah,
I've been in the area
yeah.
for 45, 50 years, and I believe Charles Townsend was the last one that lived in the district, if I'm not mistaken.
So I really
quite a bit,
appreciate hearing that and thinking about it. Bless you.
25
that-
years ago.
That is very powerful. That is something I think as well that our district may need at this time. You know, we know that there are people in the district that like to say, well, you don't care because you don't live here all the time. Well, that argument is gone, and you do live here all the time. And I appreciate what you just said. There have been multiple superintendents that we've had, and you have worked well and played well with them all, you know? Like, that is really, that's quite powerful, you know? That says something about working with the different personality types and navigating that, being here locally. And so that's how I feel about it at this moment. Thanks.
You won't be able to go to Kroger's without getting stopped for an hour. That's probably living it.
That's been happening for 18 years.
It happens every time I go there. Where you been?
So I agree with what's been said, Rod, but I'm going to look out at their audience. And this is my second time I've had an opportunity to interview for a superintendent hire. And we have never had this type of support sitting in the audience. And I have to think it's a reflection of the fact that they know you, they love you. And those folks over your left shoulder, you will always be accountable to them as a community member, as a family member. And those folks that are anywhere, the grocery store, a restaurant, just walking down the street, you will be very highly visible to them. And I will appreciate that. I also understand that you will never stand for status quo. I've seen that in you over the last 10 years that I've known of you and known you, and you're always looking what's next and what's best for students. So that's my feedback.
Thank you.
Any other questions for us?
No, I just want to say I appreciate your guys' candor. It's something I've grown to love, watching you guys have different perspectives and share them and just be open about it. It's a very exciting opportunity to work with people who are willing to agree, disagree, say what they feel, and move us forward, because that creates a very strong team. Because when you have a board that is strong and can agree to disagree and to move forward, it allows the rest of the teams to dig in and do their work. Because when you're not in that shape, that chaos spills over. So kudos to you guys for just having that ability to discuss and to have different opinions. I do have other questions that I think that we can talk about during strategic planning, because it's just about those, what directions do we want to go and what our focus is and whatnot. And we got 3 hours to discuss it, so there's no sense discussing it right here.
All right, so I'm going to give you an opportunity to summarize or kind of bring it all to a close tonight. Things that you might want to highlight or reemphasize for us before we close. And then for those folks in the audience, we are going to take a break. I'm sure most folks would appreciate that.
I don't have a long list. I think I've said a lot of what I'm thinking and feeling. I'm here to do a job to make us great. I'm here to work with people. I'm here to build relationships, but first and foremost, I'm here to make sure that our students are cared for, that they have opportunities, and that we create these systems and put them in place so that as many kids have given the opportunity to be successful as humanly possible. And then when they're not, to analyze those gaps and decide what we're going to do about it. That's the work I've been doing my whole career. That's the work I want to continue to do. I'm excited to put a very strong team together and to build culture, to analyze what weaknesses do exist out there and solve those problems. Most importantly, as a superintendent, I'm most excited to do something different, which is to work with you guys. 30% of my job should be working with you. And the other 30% should be working with the community to help them understand your vision. And then the other 30 to 40% is, doing the work in the district and having team members who do what I've been doing for 18 years. That's the job. I'm excited to do it. I'm excited to have spent my time here. I'm excited to continue to be a dragon. I just thank you so much for this opportunity to share my thoughts with you this evening.
Thanks, Rod. We appreciate your thoughtful and comprehensive responses to all of our questions and your patience with answering them. So at this point, we are going to take a 10-minute break. Given the number of restrooms in this building, I don't think it will accommodate everyone in 5 minutes. So we are going to take a 10-minute break. I am going to dismiss Rod, and then we'll call you back after we've had our discussion. Thank you.
Thank you.
feel like a teacher. Everybody take their seat. All right. And I know there's way more than that to the role. So, to my fellow board members, I've had several questions about now what are we going to do next. This is what I'm going to propose now that you've had the opportunity to interview Rod and consider his responses and considering those traits and characteristics I gave you at the beginning of the meeting. I would suggest that we have a discussion and we deliberate to our next steps. I know I wasn't here at the last meeting, but I did watch the video and actually watched the live stream. And according to your discussion at the last meeting, we have 2 remaining options. And I'll list those, and please correct me if I didn't get it quite right compared to what your discussion was. But for option 1, we would move forward with a comprehensive superintendent search based on the interview tonight, if that's your desire. This option would involve hiring a search firm for approximately $25,000 to $30,000, and they assemble a candidate pool. There are several rounds of interviews, and then there's a selection process. This is my perception of that particular option, and I will ask for your feedback. But at this point, this option does pose a significant logistical challenge with the start of school around the corner. I was having some anxiety as I was listening to Mr. Heatherton describe all that has to go on in the next 4 weeks. And I know that's not unusual, but we have 4 weeks or less before school starts. Option 2, based on what I heard on the last meeting, was to, following tonight's interview, we can have a discussion, we can deliberate, and we could choose to enter in a contract negotiation with Mr. Heatherton to become superintendent of Swartz Creek Community Schools, with the contract being approved possibly at the August 10th board meeting. So I would like to open it up and go one by one to get your feedback on how you think the interview went and input on next steps, unless you have another direction that you'd like to take. And if
What was the
not-
third option, Carrie?
The third was what we did by identifying Rod as the interim superintendent. If you recall at the last meeting,
Okay,
that was the
yeah.
And interviewing him tonight.
interview, and then interview him tonight.
So we have two, option A and B right now.
Correct. I eliminated the appointment of Rod to the interim.
I just wanted to keep him as interim till you got this work done to make him
Okay.
do a great job. Then I'll appoint him after 4 weeks. That'd make him work hard.
All right. So if there's no objection, I would like to start with Alicia and get your input and how you think this went tonight and what your next steps.
Okay. I think it went phenomenal tonight. I am exceptionally impressed with Mr. Rodney Heatherton. I always have been. And I'm hopeful that the community sees what I've seen and what we have seen in working alongside him. I know that people in this room work alongside him, whether that's personally or professionally or in some capacity, which is why he has so much support here. I honestly didn't personally need this interview, but did feel that there was a need for the community to see and hear from Rod. I would like to comment and add that and I think Chuck had one of those questions about the biggest risks, and I think Rod is extremely humble, and it may be difficult for him to actually speak to that because it's truly just his nature. That's his forte, I think, and I believe that he always looks for opportunity, always puts children first. I have my own long history of things that I would like to comment on if given the opportunity, but I've seen him from many different perspectives, and I have carried a torch that says, I don't know that my child would have been as successful in Swartz Creek if it wasn't for Mr. Heatherton. And I've had the opportunity to work alongside him now professionally as well. And I, again, am hopeful that the community can see and feel the tremendous amount of work, passion, and commitment that he has to the district. I personally would like to see a motion to hire Rodney Heatherton as a permanent superintendent for our district. That's where I sit. Again, if warranted, asked, whatever, I have my own recommendations and experiences that I can attest to if needed.
Thanks. Brian?
Well, it was a great interview, but that's what I expected. I've known Rod for many, many years, and I know he's a man of integrity. He's a professional. He's a leader, and he's been with this crew, this management group, this governance group now for several years. So I've got to see him intimately in a lot of the decisions, in the hard decisions, in the easier decisions, and his creativeness, his innovation. I really appreciate Rod. There's no question in my mind who we need for our next superintendent, and I hope we can do that tonight.
Alyssa?
Thank you. So I think on this board, I might be the one who knows Rod the least. I knew him first as a fellow parent of athletes, and we would chit-chat from time to time, but didn't really know him very well. And then all of you were nice enough to appoint me last year, just about this time. And so I've gotten the pleasure to work with all of you and also be part of many, many meetings and conversations where Rod was part of it. So I've got to learn about him a lot more. With that said, in my experience, Mr. Minka was always there as well. And so for me tonight, even though I was feeling pretty comfortable, I'm like, you know what? I want to see him stand on his own. And I feel like he did that in, I don't know what the expression is, so just beyond my expectations. And so I got to see tonight the superintendent that Rod Heatherton would be. I didn't have to see him alongside Mr. Micah, who is also a powerful force. He stood on his own. And when I looked back at the listing of the survey, the attributes that we heard from the community, I just don't know how we can't, I checked every single one. Not just from tonight, but just working with him the bit that I have been able to over the past year. And I think we're in a good momentum. And what I was glad to hear about tonight, it wasn't just like, oh, we're going to rest on our laurels and we're good and we're just going to ride the wave. There's some of that, but he brought some new ideas and some key priorities to project us to even better and to great. Because our numbers, our academic numbers are not that great. And I'm not saying other schools aren't in the same boat, absolutely. But there's some, I'd like to see us get better academically. And when we look at the data and the disproportionate numbers are concerning, and we're not the only school district that has that issue. And I think he's the leader that can help us do that. Instructional coaching is paramount. We probably don't have enough of it, but that's another conversation. And he knows it, and there's no doubt in my mind, and I would be in support of a motion tonight as well.
Thanks, Alyssa. Jack?
I've been pretty honest from the beginning that I think we have a duty, just as a board, to open our scopes and do a search. And, I like Rod. I think Rod's a good guy. I think he's got a lot of integrity, and I think he would do a really good job as superintendent. My biggest reservation is just that I think it would be smart for the board to just do a search, take a look at the least. And Rod could be the best candidate, and I would almost be shocked if he wasn't, but I think it would be wise of us to do that search. And I've been honest from the beginning about that. So when we vote tonight, if we do vote tonight, I'm going to be voting based on that. Not if we do vote, it won't be yes or no against Rod for me. It's yes or no, I think we should do a search for me.
Thanks, Jack. Chuck?
I say we hire him. And we work out, I'm a stickler for the details, though, you know, we have to put something in there that we have to work the contract out, so we don't do it open-ended where he's a permanent superintendent. I want to put it on, just, you know, I'm always CYA for the board, that we put it on that we hire him pending the conclusion of a contract, so we can all mutually agree on that, because we agreed on one contract with somebody who's been here for 5 years as superintendent. And I don't want to fall into that thing where we just do the status quo thing. I believe also that he'll do a great job. I've already said that. I gave him the kudos in the best way I can. I do like opening things up for a search, but I think with our time constraints, with what we have going on, Rod's been in the district for 20 years. I like that. That's already a plus for me. And he has a handle on what's going on. This is actually putting a lot of pressure on Rod, I think, because he knows he has to perform, because all of us and all the people in the audience are actually going to be looking at him. So I took that into consideration. So I feel pretty comfortable, pretty confident about it, except for the part of the contract. You know me, I just always want to cover the board's butt and the district, the taxpayers, actually. So that's the only other thing I got. So, yeah, I still like my 30-day plan, and just wait a second, but no, I'm okay with it. So we'll move on. You know me, I never give up. Thank you.
So technically, that's only 2 more weeks, correct?
I know that, but I want to see all this stuff done, okay?
Okay.
I'm worried about this stuff, and the stuff is, he stays up at night. Well, we got school starting in a few weeks, and the stuff has to be done. So that gives him a lot of incentive. You know, he'll be up here at night instead of not sleeping at night, making sure they're working, but I'm sure he'll get it done. I'm worried about it. Don't look close, but, okay, I've rambled on enough. You got my point of view. Thank you, Carrie.
Thank you.
Okay.
All right, Jessica.
Thanks. I think much has already been said that I agree with. One of the things, and I was talking to somebody the other day about this. I first met Rod when he was a principal at Moorish when my oldest was there. And if you don't know him, it was a bit of an extrovert. And Rod's personality sometimes is a little bit of an introvert at first. And I recognize that I can have a very difficult time with that personality. I really wasn't certain what to think of him because he's not as chatty usually as I am. But he was tonight, and I appreciate how respectful he has been as a deputy superintendent to Mr. Micah when he was our superintendent, and not trying to outshine him or overstep as somebody who lives here in the community. I appreciate that he acknowledged there are different relationships that he recognizes that he will have to build in this time with other staff, because that has not been what his responsibility has been. And I appreciate in the time being on the board, coming to know him, hearing him speak, and I think Alyssa kind of alluded to this or said it. Tonight, I got to hear Rod even more talk from his heart. I know that he had some notes, but sitting up here, he didn't look down at them a lot. He knows what's going on. You know the passion. It was really nice from this perspective, sitting here and seeing some of the people that have worked with him for a while, when he spoke about some things, that they smiled, that they nodded. Those little comments between you affirming what he has said, what he was saying, and what he was talking about. I mean, that's important, and I don't know if it's appropriate to ask this or not. I mean, we'll get to public comments. And somebody said it, I'm assuming the majority, if not all, of the people sitting here tonight are in support of him being here, you know, and that does speak volumes. And because that is about relationships, you know, that's one of the things when I came onto the board, you know, that I believe is very important, that without relationships, you're going to struggle to have success individually and collectively as a district. And if we have somebody as a superintendent who believes that strongly in those relationships and already has them formed, with so much of the really the foundational or our key, not just, I want to say our key employees, I mean, as far as our principals go and whatnot, but really with all, he's willing to build those relationships with all of our staff, but he's already, for the key for us to get rolling, for school to start in a month, he's already got those relationships pretty solidly locked. It looks like, because I'm seeing some nodding even now. And that is crucial. That's important for us to continue to be a successful district and not to have a hiccup. And I will say one last thing, that before I came onto this board, I was on another board where we had a succession plan, and we had a dynamic CEO, and the CFO is somebody who had come up all the way from when she was like in high school or college working and had like worked through every single department. And our board was looking to do, we knew much like in this situation, we had an executive who had said, I'm only going to be here for this amount of time and then I'm going to be leaving. And he strongly believed in this person and really groomed them to help them to be very successful, right? Much like what Ben's done with Rod. And we had a couple of lawyers on the board that said, but she doesn't have the degree, she doesn't have a master's, and is she gonna be successful or not? Like, maybe we should do that big search, right? And so we brought in a consultant. And to me tonight, in a way, we are that consultant. We know what we're looking for. That consultant asked the board, what is it you're looking for? What direction do you want to go in? And then interviewed our CFO to see whether or not, before we went and did some greater search, because that's an investment of time, money, and energy, can that organization really pull it off, right? Can you really afford to spend that kind of energy and resources? And anyway, and it came down to that, yes, she had the passion, she had the commitment, she knew all these areas. And I've thought about that for Rod. Rod has worked in so many different areas of this district that he has all of those functions, you know, like, to me, in part, and I understand why, because I always want to make sure, is it the best candidate? Are we getting the best thing? You know what, given what's been in front of us tonight and what we've experienced with him as the deputy superintendent, I can't think of anybody else who would be a better fit for this role.
Thanks, Jessica. So I agree with what's been said by the folks in response to the interview. I've known Rod for probably 10 years and more closely as a central office person for the last 6 or 8 years. I've always known him to be an incredible, exceptional, instructional leader who has sincere passion for students and making sure that they have what they need to succeed. You heard his description tonight of all of the best practices and the innovations that have been in place for many years and how it has helped our students succeed. It has probably been gratifying to staff, I would say, to be able to do some of those programs and make a difference in students' lives. But it's also made Swartz Creek stand out, and I'm going to give Rod the credit for that. He has spirit-led and headed the MTSS initiative for as long as I can remember. And we know that we've had people from all over the state and people across the nation who are interested in how we've put those programs in place. And I say we, with no credit as a person. So I also want to point out that he started by saying he thought we should be one of the best schools in the state. And I don't disagree. Pandemic held us back, but it's a glitch, it's a bump. And I think we've learned a lot from that. And Rod was also leading the way for introducing technology to this district. What would have happened in March of 2020 if some of the things that Rod had led to put in place, along with many of you sitting here, had not been in place? our students would not have been able to continue to learn successfully. Some of them would have had the technology, some of them would have been ready, but we gave them the tools, and it took the forethought for many years to do what was available. And so I want to thank Rod for that, as well as many of you sitting here. And I think, Alicia, at the last meeting, it was you that said, for a long time, was Ben Micah's left hand, right hand, and sometimes he was the one in charge. And that's very true. And not all of you have seen that. Many of you have seen that because you've worked very closely with him, but we've seen it as well. And I know that a superintendent is available and works 24/7. Sorry, Ashley, I knew you knew that. They are there 24/7. And they have to do whatever it takes to continue to help the staff, help our students be successful. So with that, I think that Rod is an excellent candidate. I think his interview was great. I hope we posed some challenging questions to him, and I hope that we gave him questions that allowed him to showcase some of the work that he has been doing and some of the vision that he has for Swartz Creek Schools. So with that, I would definitely support bringing him on board as our next superintendent. And with that, I hear that we have the majority of our board that has indicated an interest in going in that direction. I would entertain a motion, and if you would allow me, I would entertain a motion from someone.
Madam President?
Yes.
I do want to just refer back to our agenda and just question. It does say that there's comment, or that there's public comment.
There
I think
is.
Before we deliberate or move.
Sure.
Do we need to open that up?
I had another board member ask me as well, if you're okay with that, not resolving this part of the conversation and then allowing the public comment.
Yeah, I asked that earlier.
Okay, all right. Okay, so let's do that. And I don't know if Travis is in here or not. There he is. Good morning, Travis. So typically, we would have folks come forward and speak at the podium. But if you would like to address the board at this time, we will have public comment. Please step forward, and you can use the interview table, and the microphone, I hope, is still on. And please state your name for the record, and we'll give you 3 minutes or less.
It's not necessary. Maybe we should say who's against it. They go quicker.
But if anyone has a strong desire to come forward, I know there are several folks in the audience that would like to show their support, but I'm not going to force anyone.
They're all looking at their clock.
All right. Michelle Wildy, principal at Cyrene Elementary, and I represent our principal group as our union president. And I sent an email to all the board members early on supporting Rod Heatherton as our next superintendent. I believe in my email I spoke to many of the things that you folks and Rod have alluded to tonight. We've got a lot of work to do, and we need to get moving yesterday. So I really hope that you can bring this to a conclusion tonight with your vote, and that we can get the right people in place and continue to move forward, because we have so many great things going on. And while several years ago, I probably also, like John, would have liked to have looked outside our district and thought about bringing in new ideas and that sort of thing. However, I've watched Rod grow as a professional and as a person. It's tough interviewing in your own community, because everybody knows, like, you know, any mistakes you made or any, you know, things you do, which I make mistakes every day, and I learn from them and I grow from them. And so I think that it's tough being in your own community. As a Swartz Creek grad, as someone who's worked my whole career here, and as someone who has zero interest in working in central office, by the way, I I appreciate that Rod does want to do that job, and I appreciate the comments you've made about bringing up one of our own to be superintendent. As a Swartz Creek grad, as someone who works in the district, and when I'm looking at, in a few years, I'm going to be retiring, and many of us are, I think additional, when we're bringing on new teachers, think about that, like to our brand new principal in the audience who's probably a go-getter and wants to work his way up in an organization, you're saying to him that in Swartz Creek you can do that. In Swartz Creek you don't work all those years to be the second-hand man and then get passed over by a board. You know, you get that opportunity to go all the way to the top and try your hand at it and do your best. So I really hope you all can make a decision here tonight. We do support Rod. He is not perfect. And, you know, to some of your questions about, like, can Rod have the tough conversations? Rod's been in conversations with me where I've had to ugly cry. And I still appreciate him, and I've grown from those experiences. I think that some people maybe can't handle that. But in my case, it's made me a better administrator and a better person. So I think he is the right person at the right time, and I hope we move forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Michelle. Anyone else? All right, going, gone. All right, back to
Thank you for that, by the way.
possible, thank you. Thank you, and I would suggest that we introduce a motion, and I can read a motion that I put together this afternoon just in the event that this was the direction that we went. And Chuck, I know that you wanted something about pending a contract. Let me know if this is okay. Be it resolved that the Swartz Creek Community Schools Board of Education enter into contract negotiations with Rodney Heatherton for superintendent of Swartz Creek Community Schools. Would that be what you were saying?
I think I'm okay with that, and that leaves it open enough, Carrie, for us to make any adjustments at the next meeting. And because I want all the board members, you know, to get a good look at contracts and see where we're at. So, and if we can't do it next meeting, then we'll do it.
Do we need a timeline at all?
That's what I'm just wondering, timeline on it.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if we need it or not.
Our next, we could add.
60 days, is that okay?
Well, I would suggest that we try to resolve it in the next couple of weeks and bring it
30
back to
days?
the August 10th board meeting, if
So that means
possible.
we're going to have to meet between now and then, which gives us 12 days, 13 days.
And as was suggested, so let's act on that
Yeah,
first.
okay.
So I need a motion, or I need somebody to.
So moved.
Jessica
Support.
and Alyssa.
Can you reread it again, Carrie?
Sure. Be it resolved that the Swartz Creek Community Schools Board of Education enter into contract negotiations with Rodney Heatherton for superintendent of Swartz Creek Community Schools. All right. Any comments or questions?
Who's going to enter the negotiations? Is it going to be the entire board?
So at our last meeting, we can talk about that now, or we can vote and then talk about that.
All right, that's fine.
So Sue, can you do roll call, please?
I have a comment.
Okay, go ahead, Jack.
Madam President, I think that you should recuse yourself and abstain from this vote. I think it's mildly inappropriate for you to vote on this when you personally have written a letter of recommendation in our packet. That's my only comment. That's what I'm saying.
I'm happy to do so, Jack. I was asked to provide a letter of recommendation. It's not the first time I've provided a letter of recommendation to someone in the district. I'm happy to recuse myself, but I don't.
I will go on record to say that I don't believe you need to do so as a professional and somebody who's worked alongside him. I think it does speak, and it should speak on his behalf, his relationship and his interactions with the board. And as president, I thought it was appropriate that you from your personal opinion, it is your recommendation, but appropriately identified, and you have had a working relationship. So I just want to go on.
And I would agree with that. I think you should be voting.
Okay. All right, thanks, Jack, for your opinion. All right, with that, Sue, can you do roll call, please?
Carrie Germain,
Yes.
Jessica LaNave,
Yes.
Alyssa Parks,
Yes.
Chuck Melkey,
Yes.
Brian Sapanic,
Yes.
Jack Sayer,
Yes.
Alicia Gardner.
Yes.
7 yes.
All right, motion passes. Could I ask someone to go grab Rod from his office? Ashley, would you like to go get Rod from his office?
She needs keys.
Make sure you come back right away.
Who has my keys?
He's probably watching it on YouTube anyway. I don't know why we're having faces. He already knows the results.
Madam President,
Yeah, well, there he is right
additional
now.
comment.
All right.
I wanna-
Alicia,
she
you had
comes
a
back.
comment? You want to wait?
Yeah,
Okay.
it can be after you announce.
All right, so while we're waiting for Mr. Heatherton to join us, I want to thank all of you in the audience for your time tonight, but not just for your support of ROD and the school district, but for all that you do for students, because I see a lot of familiar faces out here tonight, and I know it means a lot to us to have this support through this process. And this isn't easy as a board. I mean, you've heard a lot of varying opinions, and you heard the exceptional interview responses that Rod had. You've also heard about our options. So I just want to thank all of you for your support of our students and of each other. And this has been a heck of a couple of years. And so we don't get to usually thank all of you in person. So thank you for being here tonight. And with that, I would like to introduce our new superintendent, Mr. Rod.
You can kiss your wife. Rod, you can kiss your wife.
Yes.
Yes.
So, Mr.
Happy
Kitchen,
birthday.
you seem to be the singer amongst us. Would you like to lead us in Happy Birthday?
Happy birthday to you. I don't need to be on.
Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, Mr. Superintendent. Happy birthday to you.
And so for the first time as superintendent, I would like you to be able to address the board and the community. Thank you.
Wow. I think I'd rather go back to the interview questions. Thank you so much for your confidence, for your support, for your encouragement, for the community who has been reaching out to me over and over again over the last 2 weeks. It's my job to do what's best for these kids, and I am so excited to get to work. Thank you. Thank you so much.
And thank you, Rod. Thanks for coming forward and being willing to continue to carry the torch for our students. So with that, I'm going to go ahead, Alicia.
Sorry. I had asked for another comment. So you did not hear, Carrie did, on behalf of the board, thank all of the audience members. I would like to make a comment that, first of all, I'm going to echo Mrs. Wildy. I never want to have to go through something like that. It's incredible to me how poised you were publicly interviewing. Ugh, I would never want to do that. But I want to recognize your family that was here. Understandably, you have little ones that can't either or other obligations, but I I would only assume that your children should be exceptionally proud. That's probably the hardest. Between your parents and your children, that's tough. To be on display, I would never want to hear the criticism my father would probably give after an interview. But it's amazing, the amount of support that you have. But I want to thank them publicly for their support of you, for giving up your birthday to share it with us. But that also speaks to your commitment to this district, that you truly put Swartz Creek above yourself and above your family, unfortunately. So thank you all for also embracing Swartz Creek. Thank you for raising an exceptional man. And I hope your children are proud of everything that you do. And thank you, Ashley, for your support and for all of the future support in advance. So thank you.
Anyone else? No? All right.
Good job, Rod. Keep piping it up.
Yes, sir.
Better do a good job, buddy.
Okay, so thank you, Rod, and we are going to enter into negotiations. So to answer your question, Chuck, at the last board meeting, it was suggested that a contract committee be formed. I would like to chair that committee, having negotiated several superintendent contracts, but I would also like, I would appreciate volunteers from two, or I will appoint two board members. That way, we don't have to schedule meetings. We can have conversations outside of the board meetings because it's not subject to the Open Meetings Act.
Can I recommend?
Yes.
My suggestion would be yourself as president, Mr. Melky with his experience, and Mrs. LeNave as our treasurer.
Excellent suggestions. Is there any objection to that? Mr. Melky or Mrs. LeNave?
I have none. When we do the three-panel thing, is this going to be here, or are we doing it?
Well, I have negotiated contracts from my living room.
I don't want to do that. I want to kind of do it
But
here.
on the phone, I mean, we could actually come up with the terms, but I would also like to get input from Rod about the type of items that he would like to have included in a contract.
He said he's going to work for free the first year. That way we can put in tennis courts and stuff.
I'm not sure that's what I said.
Yeah, okay, we're good, Carrie. We're good.
So there are some things that superintendents like in their contracts based on what their future plans are, or, some of their educational opportunities that they would like to have from the district, as an example, those types of things that they might like to have included. We do have an existing contract template that we could start from, that Rod can start from, and then we could have the conversation. I think we talked about a goal of having it finalized before our next board meeting, which would be August 10th. That would be desirable. I think you would agree, Rod, and if it's not possible, maybe at the end of August. But try to shoot for the August 10th board meeting to have a contract. Anything else? Are you okay with sitting on that committee? Okay, good.
Can we just, explanation for Open Meetings Act?
That's what I was getting at.
Yeah. We as a board cannot deliberate with more than the majority. So if we have a subcommittee of 3 individuals, they can communicate more frequently, quickly, and privately, and then share that recommendation with the remainder of the board. So I just want to be transparent as to why we're doing that.
Right, and we'll actually align with our goal of having it completed by the next board meeting. Okay? That'll be our goal.
That'll be our
Okay,
goal
great.
when we get to close to final draft. That's why I
Okay.
wanted to meet in here and get a final draft, so
Yep.
we're on the same
Yep.
page to present accurate information to the rest of our board members.
Okay.
And the public. Thank you.
All right, thank you for agreeing, and thanks for the recommendation, Alyssa.
Thanks.
Alicia. Too close. We had to rename you. All right, anything else before we close tonight? I want to
Brian
thank.
said it was going to be a short meeting.
Yeah, no.
That's all, bro.
So I want to thank all of you for your time and your preparation and, for your thoughtful input into this process. And I also want to add that, Rod, you did a great job on your interview. I was very impressed by your responses as well. And I think I know somebody really well in all the work they do. And then you just surprised me again about some of the things that you've just done behind the scenes that are amazing and make such a difference in our staff and our students' lives. So thanks again for that. And congratulations on behalf of the community and on behalf of the board. And we look forward to working with you 24/7. All right?
I'll look forward to it.
All right. So with that, I would entertain a motion for adjournment.
So moved.
Alicia, Brian, any comments or questions? All right. Those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? All right. Thanks, everybody. Take care.